Hey, this is Mathieu Frémaux aka Frameworks. I'm so glad to introduce you to version 4 of my MoglyphFX toolset, which is packed with a lot of new features. So without further waiting, let's go ahead and get started. So first thing first, the UI panel has changed quite a lot, as you can notice here, because on the left is the last version 3.8 of MoglyphFX, and on the right is MoglyphFX version 4, and as you can immediately notice, it's way more compact now. So it means more space in your After Effects layout, but it has way more to discover. So I've made some changes, I've removed some stuff, I've renamed some other features, so it's important for you to understand what. So first thing you'll notice is that the three top formerly named Generate tab, Animate tab, and Helpmate tab have been renamed Cloners, Effectors, and Other. Like that, you have way more understandable labels in the tabs, and it's now smaller in the space because it's native system tabs here. So you can go in this tab here called Effectors instead of Animate, and Other instead of Helpmate. And as you can see, there are a lot of changes too, because if I compare Animate tab and Effectors tab, this isn't the same thing at all, and the Helpmate and the Other tab aren't really the same neither. So I have to describe what's going on here. So let's go back to Generate tab in the old version of MoglyphFX and in Cloners tab in new version. As you can see, I've renamed some stuff. So before, this icon that was sitting between the Grid Cloner and the Fibonacci Cloner was called the Honeycomb Cloner. And now it's called Brick Cloner because it creates brick-like distribution, and it's shorter to write this. So again, some space here too. And this one was called Fibonacci Cloner. So this is the one you would use to create sunflower cars like distribution. But with the spiral cloner, you can do more than just using golden angle, and you can create all kind of spirals if you play with the angle. So it's normal for me to rename this spiral, and it's shorter too. So brick and spiral are the new names. You also have all these options here in the Cloners option that have been grouped and renamed and simplified as toggle buttons here. So as you can see, before you had 2D and Cloner, 2D and 3D radio buttons here, but now it's just a toggle button here that can change from 2D to 3D. Okay, so it's same than this. And you had the fill color and the stroke color. So if you click on the fill color here, you can change the fill color from there, and you can change the stroke color from here. And I've added a new option to play with the thickness of the stroke as well, because I find it's useful for outline strokes style, which I use a lot in motion design. There is a new option here that allows you to preview the font that you had there. Before, you had this drop-down list with all the Moglyph fonts embedded in the tool. So this is where you'll find all the glyph shapes that are delivered with the script, but there was no way to kind of see what font you had. So this whole drop-down list has moved there. So if you click on this guy here, you'll see the exact same list, but they will show you a little nice thumbnail that will tell you which font you have, even if you don't see the whole font name. So the basic geometry font is the default one. This is why you'll end up with a square here. But if you choose, let's say, maybe the Moglyph People, you will see immediately that you have Moglyph People font just thanks to its new little thumbnail. So this is nice, a new nice addition. So I've removed completely the ability to change from procedural to manual cloning, because absolutely no one was using this option, even me, to be honest. So it allowed me to gain some space too. Then the Add New Glyph button has moved here. And to finish on the Cloners tab, the last post effects group here, and well, the icons before were green in this post effect in version 3.8, but the post effect group has been completely changed to the third tab called Others. So it hasn't been removed, it's just have moved from place. So you now have to go to Others, so the Other tab, which is the third one, and you can still find the 5 nice post effects there. Okay, so this is it for the Cloners tab. Next, for the second tab, I will compare the two different tabs. You'll find the group effects, the plane effects, the delay effect, the formula effects, the random effects, the sound effects, the step effects, the time effects are still there. And now you have the full text with the icons, just like everywhere, in order for you to fully understand what you are going to create. But I also have grouped and simplified all the options there in this nice group of icons and little drop-down lists there. So the FX delay formula random step options, where you could change from rows, from glyphs to rows there. So this single checkbox is now there, okay? And now you have more options to play with. So before, if you were checking this option, and if you were applying a delay effector, for example, the delay effector would base the animation of the delay based on rows and not glyphs. So you still have this option available, but if you'll have to select this option here. So this is now a drop-down list with nice icons, and you have the glyphs, which is the default glyph by glyph animation, but you also have per word available, which is really incredible, because you can apply all the effectors to native text too. So you can animate by word and by line. And before it was called rows, but now it's just called line because it's plain text, right? So you have glyph, which is per character, word, and per line. So you just have to select the corresponding option you want, and by default just know that it will be per glyph, which is per character. Important too, if you see something that is bluish like that in its icon, it means that it will affect the effector itself, the way the effector plays, right? But if you have some pink options like that, it means that you deal with the fall off option of the effectors. More on that later. So yeah, this is the FX fall off options that you had before there. So randomize, linear fall off by rows, and the shape options you had there. That was the way you were dealing and changing with the effectors fall off options in previous version, and now you all have this option there. So fall off options, it's pink, right? So if you play with these options, it's allowing you to change from per glyph to per word or per line, right? It's the same thing than this option, but it's for the fall off only. And you have the shape that has now a nice preview icon, and it allows you to really understand what's going on in the shape. So it's a nice addition to have these little icons but it's the same as these options, basically. And if you click on this option, the 1, 2, 3 icon, let you understand that by default, it will animate things clone by clone by their index. So 1, 2, 3 in their index order. But if you click one time on this, the icon will change and you will see this nice shuffle icon, which means that you have randomized the fall off, right? And if you have the order, this one option, which is the default, you can play with this option. But if you click on that to have the random order active, you can see that this option here will activate too. So we can play with that. It's just a way to randomize the random seed of each effector. More on that later. Okay, so this is it for this option. As you can see, I've not told about this option because I've removed completely this option. Nobody was using that, neither me, so it has been removed. Okay, third option, third tab, sorry, if you go in Help Met panel in the option, in the older versions, you have to go to the other tab here, the third one too. The orange color scheme allows you to understand where you are, so green for cloners, blue and pink for effectors, and orange for other. As you can see, there are new stuff there, like new tools. I will speak about that later. But you can also see then that the FX parameters here have completely been removed, but in fact it's still there. You just have to know where. So the whole thing here, FX parameters with all those checkboxes and these icons, is now in optimized parameters. So this is this icon here. So if you click on that, you will have this nice panel that will pop up and will offer exactly the same options you had there, right? So this is thanks to these options that you can optimize your effectors. So I will close this one. And of course, you will find all the other tools you had before. So you have the other ones you had there are now there, okay? So you still have custom font, you still have remove glyph, remove effects, okay, just like you had before. And you have change settings and info license there. And you have a new way to see the glyph appendix. So if you click on that, you will open the glyph appendix, which is the PDF that is containing all the fonts that you have in MoglyphFX, and where you see all the glyphs embedded in all fonts. So this is really useful to have that directly from MoglyphFX. You don't have to go to the aescripts website actually, because you were bound to do that before, but now we just have to click on this glyph appendix and you will have it from there. So this is cool to have too. And yeah, we have the post effects that come from there before. And yep, you have a few more options. We will play with that later. And this is it for the new UI. Oh yeah, there is something that is pretty cool too. You can also have a variant of this MoglyphFX new UI that is even more compact. So if you know MoglyphFX by heart, like I do because I've created MoglyphFX, you can have even more space saved in your After Effects layout by going there in Other, Change Settings. I've removed a few options there, but I have added a new one, which is Compact UI. Okay, so no text labels in buttons. And if I click on that option, and if I say Save Settings, it will tell me to reopen the script after a while. So, okay, I will close it. I will retake it and reopen it. Okay, and now, as you can see, I've got a brand new version of the UI, which is way more compact. There isn't any text there, so it means that I can save that much space, okay? And now you can have all the tools available in this really small panel, which is pretty convenient for people who want to save some space and who know MoglyphFX sufficiently. So this is it for the new UI of MoglyphFX version 4. And for the sake of the tutorial, I will go back to the full version of the UI. So you'll have to go to the third tab, Other, and click on this nice cogwheel icon, which is Change Settings, MoglyphFX, and I will click on that, and we'll uncheck this, and I will save settings again. Okay, close it, and now let's reopen it. Let's dock it in the layout, and we will continue the tutorial based on this layout here. The Spline Cloner has received a brand new mode called Point Mode. So if you go over the Spline button with your mouse cursor, and if you hold down the Shift key, it will be the Count mode. And if I hold down the Alt and the Shift key, it will be the Point mode. So the new mode is the Point mode, and the old one was the Count mode. So now if I click on the Bezier tool, and if I try to draw a spline, okay, so let's create a simple spline with a stroke and maybe a white color. Okay, so I've got a Bezier shape. If I select it and if I click in the Spline Cloner, on the Spline Cloner button, it will ask me if I prefer to have the standard Count mode, which is the one from previous versions of MoglyphFX. So it will clone shapes along the path and will be able to decide how many clones you want along the path. Or if you click on No, it will create the Points mode instead, and it's the new Point mode. So if I click on No, you can see now that I don't have that much clones along the path. So if I undo that, and if I click again on this icon, and if I click Yes, you have way more icons now. So this is the old version of Spline Cloner, so it still works, of course, because you could need one of those two modes. So if I twill down this option, and if I play with the Count option, it means that I can add more or less clones on this path. But now if I remove this, if I select this, and if I click on this one, and if I click on No, this is another type of Spline Cloner. So if I twill down this object option, you don't have the same options than previously. You can't have a count mode. You have actually a count slider, but it's forced to be on 5 because I have 5 points on my spline. So if I twill down this option, and if I shift click on the path here in order to play with the Bezier tool and move the points, as you can see, I can move my spline points. Okay, and the path, of course, of the shape layer is changing, but the clones also changes their position. So this is the new points mode, and it's pretty powerful. So I will show you how to use that and all the available options. So I can go to the Moglyph Cloner Spline Point mode, and if you twill down the object subgroup, you have of course the same options than before, so you can iterate or randomize clones if you have more than one single shape. You can change the layer if you have several layers with such Bezier. So let's say you create a second shape layer with maybe this pink. Okay, I have a second shape layer here. I can go back to my Moglyph Cloner Spline Point mode and change the spline path form. So I can choose another layer if needed. Okay, this can be useful. And if I go back to this object, I also have the group selector. So to demonstrate the group selector, maybe it will be nice to show you another example. Oh, actually, I will stay with this example, but I will create a second shape inside this shape layer. Okay, so if I create a new shape as you draw, as you can see, it will take this shape instead. And if I continue to create another shape, okay, this one, for example, as you can see, it will always take the up shape, the one that is at the top level of the content hierarchy. And this can be decided by the group selector. So by default, it's 1. So this is the first one. But if I type 2, it will select the second, which is this one. And if I type 3, I will select the other one. So this is a way to conveniently select which group you want on your shape layer. And of course, it only works with shape layer. It won't work with masks on solids because you don't have groups in masks. So yeah, you can vary this slider here, and it will be clamped, just for you to know, it will be clamped to the number of groups you have in a shape layer. This is why there is an expression here. Okay, let's remove these two guys and stick with one single path. Okay, if I continue with the options, you have path points, which is the value that is checked on by default. If I uncheck this, I don't have any points, so the count is 0, right? So if I check it again, I have now 5 points in the count because I've got exactly, well, select it again. I have exactly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points that I've drawn with my Bezier point. But now, as you can see, there are also some in tangents and out tangents. So this was the first point I've drawn. So I don't have any tangent here, but if I go to the second point, I've got an in tangent because it goes in this direction. So this is called an in tangent, and this is the out tangent. And every point have this if you draw a Bezier point. So you can choose to not clone on path points, but on the path in tangents instead. So if I click on in tangents, and if I uncheck path points, you have now cloned your clones onto the in tangents, as you can see. Okay, so if I move the in tangents, the clones will follow the in tangents point. Okay, which is pretty nice too. You can also have the out tangents if you check this one instead. So you can have either the in tangents and the out tangents, or you can have both, of course. So now if I play with all the points tangents, you have the in and you have the out. Okay, so this is cool because you could, for example, now clone onto the points with one specific shape. Let's do that actually. So I will select the path points for this one. I will duplicate my layer. I will go back to there. I will uncheck path points here, and I will check the path in points and out points there. And I can drill down the transform here and play with the scale, for example. Let's say 50%. And maybe change the color if needed. And now, as you can see, I have a different visualization for each point and each tangent, right? So this is pretty nice, pretty cool. And if I want to change the glyph from being a square, because maybe that's not what I want, I can still go to this one and click with, actually, let's remove that because it will bother me each time. So select this one and click on this option and choose another shape, maybe this one. And as you can see, now I have a square for each point and this little nice target circles for each tangent, which is pretty cool. So this is it for the different path points, path in tangents, and path in out tangents options. So let's remove this second one and stick with just the path points here. Okay, there is also a really useful option called numbers mode. And this is specific to this new Spline point mode. You won't find anything similar in other cloners. This is really only the Spline point mode that can do that. So if you twill down this numbers mode, if you click on replace glyphs by numbers, and if you click on this checkbox here, you will see that your squares, that was the default shape, will be completely changed to something else. And it tells you that you don't have one single character now. You have a full range of different characters. And in order to fully understand what's going on, you'll have to go to the character panel, change the font, let's say Arial, for example, or a nice mono, Andal Mono, for example, because I'm on a Mac, and I can still play with the size. And for example, and you can force them to be italic, for example, and play with various options like spacing. You can do whichever you want in this character panel. Conversely to regular MoglyphFX cloners. So as soon as you have checked this replace glyphs by cloner, you are able to play with those options here. The only thing that you can change in the color of the fill and the stroke, which is still available in the transform there. So if I don't like the green color here, I can change the fill color there and maybe put a red color, and that's how you change the colors of the fill and the stroke for this new numbers mode option. So if you click on this option, by default, you will end up with the numbers being displayed as the points coordinates. And this is what it's meaning, okay? So if I play with this point here, maybe I will take the first point of my shape. If I put this point at the very top left side of my comp, as you can see, the coordinates change, and it will be exactly 0 on X and 0 on Y if I put exactly at the top left corner. So this is why it tends towards 0 and 0. And if I go with this one on the bottom right corner, it will go up to 1080 pixels. So this is for X and this is also for Y, okay? Because this is the dimensions of my comp. And those values will change depending of the coordinate system here, okay? Which is based by default on the comp. So from top left, origin to the dimensions of the comp. But you can change these to be based on the shape layer path, so to be local. So if I change the coordinates system to be on the shape, which is this option here, shape center origin, it will change, and now you have negative values for all the points that are on the left of the anchor point, and positive values on the right and on this side of the shape layer. So now if I play with this point here, as you can see, if I tend towards the center of the shape layer, so I have my 0, 0, 0 here, which is the anchor point of my, so let's add the cross here in order to see what I'm doing. So if I go there, I have exactly 0, 0, 0, all right? Because the center point is here. So this is a really different way to play with values. And this was for the points coordinates mode. And you have also some useful other ways to add text. So if I change the numbers to display to be point index start at 0, it will be replaced by the index of each point. So this is of course by the order I've drawn this shape. Okay, so the first point is index 0, the second one is index 1, this one is 2, this one is 3, this one is 4. And of course, if I select my shape layer and if I add some new points with the Bezier tool, let's say with that, it will of course update the index of each point there. Okay. And maybe you don't want to have starting numbers from 0, so you could prefer to have a number 1, a number 2, number 3, etc. This is why I've put another mode called points index plus 1 that will start with 1. So in this case, you will start with 1, 2, 3, etc. And this is great because now you can double click on the text layer itself, because don't forget, MoglyphFX is all based on text layers. So if I double click and type maybe point number, as you can see, this is really convenient because you can now dynamically add prefix to your numbers. And this is why I've offered this option index plus 1, because otherwise you would have point number 0, which isn't really human readable, except if you are a developer, right? So this is pretty cool, and you can of course double click to change it to whichever naming you want. So name 1, name 2, etc, etc. So this is cool, and this was the new Moglyph Cloner Spline Point mod. And the Spline Cloner also comes with useful shortcuts, so you don't even have to confirm the yes or no buttons, and you can go faster. So if you hold down Shift, you will force the Spline Cloner to be on the old count along the path mode, just like the previous versions of MoglyphFX, like that. And if I select my shape layer and if I hold down both the Shift key and the Alt key, you will create instead the new point mode, which I've just demonstrated right now. So it's a way to go way faster and to avoid the opening of this annoying confirm window, which is an unwanted step if you ask me. So please do yourself a favor and just learn the shortcut. The Grid Cloner also has got new options. So if you click on Grid Cloner, you will end up with a perfect regular grid of 5x5 squares. And by the way, it's as a reminder, the square is due to the fact that the Moglyph basic geometry is the default font chosen in the list, and that if you select your cloner and click on Add New Glyph, the very first shape you will find in this basic geometry font is this perfect square. So you end up with such a regular grid by default, and if you now drill down the object group from the Moglyph Cloner effect, you will find now 3 new options called taper grid, taper clamp, and taper invert. So if you increase the value of the taper grid, which is a percentage, you can see that until a certain point, you will end up with kind of a triangular shape, like a pyramidal shape. And if you add more to the count X and count Y, let's add 8 by 8. And you can go until a certain point, but if you go, let's say, until 12 in my case, you will end up with being clamped to a certain value. So you won't be less than the number of rows that is defined by this 8 number here. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. But if you uncheck this option below called taper clamp, you will be able to go further this point value. So if you continue to increase this value until a certain point, you will end up with just a single line of glyphs. And yeah, just keep in mind that this is due to this type of clump that allows you, whichever value you put there, to not go over the limit of the count y rows number. And if you want to create a nice pyramid, for example, with its base on the floor, you can, of course, invert the taper effect, and this is why the third option exists. Just check this option to have the exact inverse, right? And yeah, this is very handy to create a new kind of pyramidal triangular distribution shapes. MoglyphFX version 4 also comes with really cool features for text animations. So if you go over there, which is the drop-down list where you'll find every single font delivered with MoglyphFX, plus the custom fonts you have designed in yellow here, if this is the case and if you have designed some custom shapes. But at the very bottom of this drop-down list here, in green icons, you have now two new options called MoText Distributed Letters with the L letter icon for letters, and MoText Duplicated Words with W standing for words, of course. So if I choose MoText Distributed Letters, for example, firstly, and if I click on any of the cloners type you already know to clone glyph habitually, with this option selected, if now I choose, for example, a radial cloner, you end up with something pretty different from normal. So if I uncheck the view of the mask, because it's on the mask, now as you can see, you don't have some squares like you have normally, but you can edit the text like this by double-clicking this text layer, and it's called MoText because you can edit this. And let's type something cool, maybe something like MoglyphFX is so awesome. And now, as you can see, every letter has been correctly distributed along the circular path, and you can still select your text and play with the properties of the character panel, so either in the character panel or in the property panel, and you can still change the size of your font, the tracking, the baseline shift. Yeah, the tracking won't do anything actually, because everything is bound to the ring shape, but you can still play with the base shift, the italic, anything that you can do with normal text usually. You can also change the font, of course, so you can use anything, and you can change the color, not in the character panel, but in the transform of the Moglyph cloner itself. So you can change the fill color there. Okay. And the stroke color also, if you need to, and the stroke thickness. If you need stroke thickness, you have first to go to the character panel and add some thickness by going there. Okay, so you can actually see that now that I've activated and forced it to have a contour, you can play now with the stroke thickness. Otherwise, you won't have that. And now I can change the fill color and only have the stroke color and the fill thickness. And yeah, this is it. You can also see that you have the possibility to select your MoText layer. And if you go back to Moglyph, you can go to Effectors and apply any effectors you want. So for example, I can add the new Formula Effector. And if I play with that, I can, for example, let's decrease that. And yeah, something like this. And you can really do whatever you want with the cool effectors from MoglyphFX. So, yep, pretty nice addition to be able to use letters and custom text with the cloner's distributions. So the example I've just shown is made with the radial cloner, but actually these new modes work with any kind of cloning. Okay, so if you have this, again, this MoText distributed letters selected in the drop-down menu, and then if I choose, for example, grid, as you can see, now I have the options to play like for a grid cloner. So I can choose, I can play with the X gap, the Y gap, and I can type anything. So it can be any text, let's say any text on several lines. And this is actually some regular After Effects native text. It's not Moglyph cloners and not replaced by custom fonts. So you can change the font again. Okay, so yep, you can still type in, double click and edit your text. So this is cool. And again, yeah, you can play with the X gap, the Y gap, and use any of the cool effectors from Moglyph, right? So you can add random effector and so on. So you have grid cloner, big cloner, spiral cloner also works. You have the spline cloner that actually works too. So if I draw a shape layer with a path, I can just select my shape layer, and with this MoText distributed letters selected, I can then click on Shift and Spline. Oh, sorry, I have to select my shape layer first. Shift and click this Spline button, and now I can go over there and play with the offset, right? So you have now a nice text that is bound to the path in one click, and you can still edit that. So editable text. All right. So yeah, this is pretty cool. You can play with the spacing between letters by playing with the start and end. So I can go further with the end, for example. And yep, this is cool. So this is one way to use that. So you have spline, you have linear, radial, spiral, grid. Brick also works too. So if I click on that, this is the same for the grid cloner. And by the way, you have some options that are red, sorry, because they are overwritten by expressions, and of course you don't have the possibility to play with the count X and the count Y nor the count itself, because it depends of the words you are typing, right? So words you are typing will change the count, and this is why they have expressions there. But you can still play with the X gap and Y gap. Okay, cool. So this was for the first MoText distributed letters mode, and you have another mode called MoText duplicated words, which is also very cool. Let me show you why. So now you have this W icon, and now if I click on radial like before, you have exactly the same kind of stuff that you had previously, but now if I double click and if I type any word, like maybe hello, as you can see, I type only one single time one word, and it will be duplicated and cloned as it should, based on the cloning mode you have chosen. Here I've cloned in radial mode. So now I have exactly, if I drill down this option here, a count of 5 words. If I type 8, I will have 8 words. If I type 12, I will have 12 words. Be careful with the value you put in there, because of course since everything is bound to the path, there will be one point over which you will go each letter over each letter, and it won't be legible anymore. So be careful with the values. But yeah, each word now acts like a single glyph, like in with glyphs mode here. So this is very cool, and also it works also with any kind of cloner. And yeah, if you select this word, MoText duplicated word option, you have also an additional slider called words spacing here. And depending on the cloner type you have, so the word spacing allows you to have, if you have 0, it means that you won't have any space between your letters. If you had 1, it will add one single space character. 2, it will add two space characters. 3, and so on and so on. So, and you can still select your cloner and play with the character panel or property and change the size of your text and the base height and slant and the font. So I can have this nice Bebas font here. And yeah, this is pretty cool. So I can select it and maybe use a simple time effector, let's say. And now every letter will rotate and change its color hue. But if I change the parameters to be not affecting the rotation Z, but the position X, it will make the text rotate along the path because this is a closed path. All right, this is very cool. And of course, what I've shown here also works with these words, duplicated words MoText in all the different cloner types. So if I select the grid, I have a grid now of MoglyphFX text. I can double click and edit that to be, let's say, text, for example. And now I can select it, go there, and play with the count on X and the count on Y. And you have a custom grid of text, right? Which is pretty cool. So you can do a lot of cool stuff with that. You can go over there on MoglyphFX Effectors and let's say use a Formula Effector with a pair word effect. So if I select the pair word here and click on Formula, you will see the word being animated word by word. And this is typically something that you will have Cavalry doing. So instead of using Cavalry, which is another software, you can now rely on Moglyph version 4 and its awesome text animation possibilities. There was something I forgot to mention while using the new MoText distributed letters and MoText duplicated words. As you can see, if one of those two new options is selected in the drop-down menu, you won't have access to the Add New Glyph button. But if you select anything else, so not one of those two, you will be able to retrieve the Add New Glyph button here. And this Add New Glyph button has received a few improvements, so let me show you right now. So if I try to click right now on the Add New Glyph button, it will say something like that. You must select one Moglyph cloner layer. Okay, so let's create a radial cloner, and now it's selected. I can now use the Add New Glyph button and choose any of those shapes embed in the font. Let's say this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one, and let's close that. So this is how you deal with the glyph shapes and how to add new glyph shapes to your cloner setups. But if I remove that, and if I don't want to use a cloner, and I just want to use the same glyph panel I've seen just previously with a nice thumbnail of the 100 glyph shapes embedded in the font, I now can do that even if I don't have a cloner selected. So again, if I click on that, I've got this message. But if I shift click on that and look at what happens in the help tip, if I go over the button with my mouse cursor, it says add one or new glyphs from the chosen font to the selected cloner. And if I plus shift, add new glyphs to new text layers and convert them to shape. So how does it work? So if I hold down the shift key and if I click on that button, it will allow me to pick any shape from the grid I've got in the glyph panel. So let's say, for example, this one, this one, this one. And as you can see, all the shapes I'm clicking on in the grid, I'm constantly added to the source text of a newly added text layer called Moglyph Basic Geometry Font Sample. And you can still add them. And if I double click on it, you can just select those and continue to edit those with maybe even typing something. And you can still select it again and you can go back to that, shift click again, and with this one selected, you can still add this one. And again, you can add text to the source text. So this is really convenient if you want to create custom strings made of some Moglyph shapes, okay, based on some specific fonts. So maybe, and this is just an example, you would want to create like a footer of a web page. So I will select the Moglyph UI element here, and I can shift click, and maybe I want to click on these buttons here, which are the icons for each social network. So Facebook, Google+, Instagram, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Snapchat, etc., etc. And I can close this window. And now that I've got this, it's not a cloner. It's just some regular text. So it means that I can play with the text size. The text, if I've got an enter, just to have that on 2 lines, I can play with the spacing, the vertical spacing. I can play with the spacing horizontally, the baseline shift, and the color here, and the color of the stroke, the fill, the stroke thickness if needed. And this is just a regular text, right? So this is really interesting. And of course, as you may know, MoglyphFX also offers effectors that are compatible with native text. So this is just native text, and I will speak about that later, but trust me there, I can just offset glyph by glyph. Yeah, perfect. For a web page footer, it's just perfect animation, and it just takes a few seconds to set up. So this is nice and handy. Another use case you could have for that is when you want to create specific bullet points. So let's, for example, stick with the Moglyph UI elements. And I will shift click on that and just click on, let's say, this check signs here. So I will click on that and I will close the window. And as you can see, it keeps the latest settings for your text, which was, in my case, this baseline shift, which isn't normal. So I will at this level, for example, I will remove the thickness of the stroke. I won't want a stroke, for example, and I want a perfectly white color. And this is my check size, right? So now if I create a text layer that is regular text, and if I type my list item 1 with a normal font, let's say something like this, okay, I will just copy this one too. I can now just double click on my initial Moglyph UI text, copy it and paste it at the beginning of my item. And I can now mix my different fonts. So this one should be 0, all right? And this one can be, yeah, just a bit like this. I'm just playing with the baseline shift. Okay. And now if I select this, I copy the whole line, I have my custom list made of some custom bullet points, right? So this is nice. And I can, of course, animate that with the MoglyphFX Effectors too. So I can shift delay that, and again, it will animate letter by letter. If I undo that, I can change per line. So I will change this guy here to be effector per line, and I will be animating with the delay effector again with shift. And we have just animated in seconds list with different items, line by line, with a nice decay, and with custom bullet points in front of each line. And of course, you have a lot of control over the delay effector, so I can have way more spacing in the timing, so I can deploy the animation order, have an offset way longer, like that. And I can also select another paragraph justification. Okay, and I can also play with the options here and align things on the left by deploying the options here on the text layer. And now I have my list of bullet points animated, right? So this is handy to have these new possibilities in Add New Glyph button. And that's not the end of this new feature, because you can go even further. Because now if I shift click on this button while also holding down the Alt key, so Shift and Alt, I will also use this same grid glyph panel, but I have also, by holding down the Alt key, checked on this option, which says that it will auto-convert to shape outlines instead of adding to a text layer. It will not be editable after a while, so this is something to keep in mind. So if I, let's say, I want this Pinterest icon here, now that this option is ticked on, I will click on this button, and now you have that. Be careful, because it will depend on what you had in character panel and paragraph panel. Of course, I was justified on the left, so this may not be what you want. In this case, just go in the center and zero back everything there. Maybe you can also right click there and click on reinit characters, and now you have the default settings. So you have white and no stroke, and baseline is 0, etc, etc, and the paragraph is centered. And now if I go to Moglyph, I will choose maybe another cool font, maybe one of the new fonts called Moglyph Motion Design 2. And if I Shift Alt this Add New Glyph button, I can now pick any of this shape, and it will be created at the right center of the comp, and it will be a vector shape. So let's say I like this one, and you have instantly created this. The panel is also closed for you, and you have that as a shape layer. So it means that you can now maybe add some gradient fill, which is not possible with regular text. So it can be handy to have such thing as shape layer and not font. And now you can keyframe this and use this as normal shape layers, right? Just for you to let you know, I can also just shift click this button again, and it will not, because the Alt option wasn't held down, but I can check on manually anytime to create the same kind of behavior. And you have now this nice shape that you can move around and keyframe as normal layers. And of course, this is all vector based, so you can drill down the content of your shape layer and go there and shift click on that to edit the points of the glyph if needed. So This is also a nice addition. You couldn't do that with native text layers if it wasn't converted to shape layer. And the cool thing is that it's done with one single shortcut. Again, if I redo that last time, just hold down the Shift key and the Alt key and click on this button again. And it will automatically click on this option for you, and you just have to select the shape you need, for example this one, and now boom, you have exactly what you want. You can keyframe and animate your shape, which is great. In order to showcase the new revamped Formula Effector, I will need either a text layer or a cloner layer. So I will showcase this with the linear cloner, and I will just hold down the Shift and the Alt key in order to force the linear cloner to be aligned on its center clone. So I will Shift and Alt and click this button. Then I will go to the object, per step transform, and I will zero out the position Y in this per step transform to have a perfect horizontal line, and I will twill down the transform subgroup and scale on X, let's say 25%, and on Y 25% as well, and I will reduce the position X in the per step transform, so something maybe like a 38, and I will add more count. So I will add something like 24. Perfect. So I've got something to work with, and I can now select it and go to the second tab called Effectors, and I will now be able to click on the Formula Effector. There are some shortcuts for a few Effectors buttons, but I will talk about this later. So for now, just select your cloner or your text layer and click on the Formula Effector. And as you can see, instantly you have, if you play with animation, you have this nice wavy animation that pushes the clones on the y-axis. So this is nice. This is a default wave animation. So if I select my clone and I go inside the Effector Formula Effect, I can twill down the Effector tab, and there are a lot of new options there. So now you have to select the mode you want to work with before. So you have 3 different modes. So if you go in the modes, you have a drop-down list. The default is curve animation, which gives you this nice wavy animation, but you can also select an end selection and random directions. Those guys were already existing in previous versions, but I will talk about this later. So yeah, if you stick with the curve animation, you have to go in the curve animation options subgroup here. So I will twill down this guy here, and you have all this to play with, which you didn't have, before. So first thing to notice is that now you have a curve formula that has different formulas. So by default, it's waves, because it's based on the sin wave. So it's trigonometric function, but you have also different other formulas. So if you stick with waves, you can play with the maximum value. So 100% will move the clones towards the position Y in positive direction, because the parameters, if we twill down the parameters transform, if you have a look at which parameters is not at 0, it's the position Y, which is on 100 pixels. So it will go 100 pixels toward the bottom of the composition, of course, because it's positive. And maximum 100 will, if you decrease this value to 0, it means that the maximum will not push the clones at 100%, but at 0% for the maximum. And you have the same thing for the minimum value, which is minus 100%. So if I increase this value to 0, you have something that now is sorry, I meant 0, you have a perfect line. So you have full control over what will be your minimum and your maximum value. And you can also invert this if needed, right? So let's stick with the default 100% maximum and minus 100% minimum. You have the frequency, and the frequency by default is 1, which means this kind of animation for that much clones, and for the remainder I have exactly 24 clones in my setup. So it will depend of the number of clones you have. Okay, so you can see that it changes depending of that. And if you want something that is more like a big wave, you have to reduce the frequency. So something that is smaller than 1, something like maybe 0.5, will be exactly half the value we had before, and you have now this nice wave motion, right, which is way more organic compared to previously. You can even go further. Of course, you can have something like 0.25, or you can even have some values like 0.1, or even smaller if needed, and you will have big waves like this. Really depends of what you want to achieve. So I will stick with something like 0.5 in this example. Of course, the speed here is the speed of the clones when they are moving. So if you increase this value to something like maybe 10, you will have something that is way faster. And if you have something that is like 0.5 instead of 4, you will have something that is really slow. Okay, so you can decrease or increase this value if needed. You can also have negative values if you, let's say again, if I play this default value to 4, it goes, we have the impression that the wave is going towards the right side, but if you want to go the left side, we can decide to have -4 and it will go in the other direction. Okay, and now the wave seems to be moving towards the left, right? So I can go back to there, have a positive number to 4. Let's default that to this value here. We have also, if we go back to frame 0, the ability to push the time offset to something that is not 0 degree. And in this case, you will progressively change and offset the value of the phase of my wave animation. And if I undo that, and I can also add, which is very cool, and we hadn't this option before, you can add some time variation. And right now we have something that is perfectly wavy, but if I play with the time variation, which is 0 now, and if I increase this value, I can see that progressively, as I move this value, I can now randomly offset the timing of each of my clones. So if I preview the animation now, I have the exact same motion, but with random timings. And this is really nice because it allows so much new possibilities. So yeah, very great addition to be able to play with time variations. So this is it for the these new options. Of course, if you deal with random, you have a source you can play with. So if I'm not satisfied with the distribution now, I can just change the value of the source and I will obtain something completely different, of course. Okay, so this is it for now. I will zero out this option. And yeah, you have also something called curve interpolation. So it may not be that evident to show you that with this specific curve, but I will try anyway. So the curve interpolation by default will not touch the wave animation that is a perfect scene wave here. But if I change the linear to something that is something else, maybe ease with 33% or maybe super ease, which is 66%, like this, you can see that now you have something that is a bit more squarish towards the peaks of my curve. So this is linear, this is ease, and this is super ease. As you can see, these are some options to play with. And if you have ease in or ease out, or super ease in and super ease out, you can see that it will have something that is more like a plateau for the out, and a bit more, a bit faster in the peaks. Okay, so you can play with this option to have peaks there and plateaus there if you choose super ease in, or the inverse with a super ease out if you want to. So if you play the animation there, you can see that it affects the curve with a very subtle change. Of course, with the wave scene here, it doesn't make that much difference, but you will see with different other curves that it can change dramatically. So I will just stick with linear for now, and I will show you the different curves that exist. So you have waves, you have bounce, which is exactly the same than waves, but with an absolute value, so it won't be negative at all. So if I select bounce, it will just cut the different negative values and just put them as positive. So this is how bounce works. Of course, if you want to have different balls animation that are bouncing on the floor, you would have to go in the parameters, transform, and have position Y being negative value, something like that, for example. And now you have something that seems to be bouncing again and again with a nice offset motion. And of course, you can play with time variation to have a lot of balls and squares that are bouncing on the floor like this. So this is pretty cool. I will undo that, so no time variation. This is for the bounce, and you have also the spikes. So if you compare the waves to the spikes, the wave was very organic, but the spikes is very linear, like a mechanical motion. So if I play the animation, this is very mechanical, very linear. And of course, I can also play with the option I've shown before, which was a super ease and super ease in and super ease out, if you want to have something that is more plateau-like in the peaks. But I will stick with the linear for now. And there is also, I will finish with the sawtooth because it's so cool to have this new option. But let's continue right now with the blocks. So blocks is just a scene wave with a rounding. So we'll end up with something like this, which is like a retro 80s video game like Pac-Man or something like this. And it can be useful for all kind of stuff. So yeah, blocks will give you this nice cut-like animation, which is nice to have also. And of course you have time variation again, so you have something like that. And you can create, let's say, flickering text or flickering codes in code editors if needed. So yeah, the very last one I wanted to showcase is the sawtooth. But before that, I will zero out the time variation just for you to know how it works. So I will change the curve formula last time. I will click on sawtooth, which is a modulo and a absolute value. And yeah, you have this kind of animation, which is pretty specific, I have to say, but it's very, very powerful, because now if you time variation, if you add some time variation, and if I add this, I have this kind of motion. And now you can even consider this full text layer, which is just a text layer. This cloner is a text layer like any text layer native from After Effects. don't forget that you can just have some regular characters on a text layer also, and change this square by any glyph that comes in this glyph panel. But now, yeah, if you go over there, if you go to the parameters transform, and if you play with the visibility, which is at 100% by default, if you zero out this animation, you can see that now the square are like popping up and rising up toward the top of the composition, and they are fading out as they travel. So this is very great if you want to create particles like motion. So this is very cool. Of course, you can play with these values with the position Y and have something even more big in the motion. And you can still play with the speed, have something smaller, for example. And this is where the curve interpolation can also play a big role, because right now you have something that is very linear also in the motion. But imagine that you have a fire. If you want to have a fire with pixels rising up in the sky, you should have something that is slower at the beginning and faster in the air as they're rising up. So if you change the curve interpolation not on linear but on, let's say, super ease in, you will see that now you have the clones that slowly begin to rise up and stay a bit more as they start, as they kind of birth. Okay, so this is a really interesting effect. And if you, let's say, have something that in the other way, so if you have 200, a positive value, you can also have a motion that kind of resembles what happens when you have a waterfall, right? So imagine that those are some water droplets in a waterfall, and they should remain a bit more at the beginning and begin to fall faster as they fall down the waterfall. Okay, so this is a very cool animation ability to be able to interpolate the whole formula. And of course, if you select the ease out, you will have the exact inverse in terms of effect. So if I select this one, it will arrive and slow down as they arrive here. So it can also be something that you want. And of course, you can select both of them by selecting maybe super ease. So it will slow down here, and be faster in the middle. So pretty cool animation, pretty cool effects. So this was to show you how to work with the curve animation new features. This is it for the new Formula Effector curve animation. So for the sake of the following parts, I will just remove this guy here and create a new linear cloner with shift click to force center it. And I will, I will stick with this one, and I will twirl down this guy, per step transform, zero out this option, have more clones here, select it again, and if I go to Effectors, Formula again, I had to select my Moglyph Cloner first, Formula, okay, if I twirl down this Formula Effector, if I now choose the mode, not curve animation, but end selection, it will affect one clone over two, which is because if you select end selection, you have to go to end selection options, twirl down this guy, and you have the end count to be on 2 by default. This is why if you go to parameters, transform, if you play with this position Y here, it will position Y to this value, each end clone specified here with this value. So you could also, to make it more visible, play with the style and uncheck colors from cloner and let them red, and maybe not affect the position Y if this is not what you want. And in this case, you can clearly see that all the red clones are the n counts specified here. So 1/2, if I type 1/3 in n, you will have the third, the sixth, and so on, the ninth. And if you have 4, you have 1/4, etc. So if I go over 3 and if I play with a selection offset, I can offset this value in order to animate the change, right? So you can animate that to make your selection travel along the indices. So this is how you deal with the end selection. And now if I remove this guy again, and if I select something that is more interesting for the next one, I will choose maybe in the fonts here, I will choose Moglyph directional font, which has some nice arrows here. And I will select Grid Cloner. And if I add new glyph by clicking this button with some arrows, so maybe this glyph here, if I close this guy, and if I select my cloner with all these arrows, I can go over the Effectors tab and click on Formula again. And now if I go in the Effector formula, if I twirl down this group, and now if I choose not curve animation, not end selection, but random direction, I have to go in the random direction option, and it will say to you, reset all parameters, but set transform rotation Z to 36. Okay, let's do that. So go to parameters, transform, reset all parameters. So reset position Y not to be 100, which is the default value, but 0. And if you transform rotation Z to 36, let's do that. So rotation Z 26, so it's 1 full turn. You have now random direction for all my clones. And in this case, you can play with the random direction options, which are direction possibilities, which is by default 4, because you have normally 90% of the time you will need 4 different direction, but you can also choose 2 different direction, and in this case it will be only top and bottom direction. If you have 3, you can have the arrows pointing either this way, or this way, like a triangle. Okay, and you can also change to 6 maybe. You have all the direction available, which are for an hexagon. If you type 8, you will be able to have some pointing arrows toward the top, the bottom, the left, the right, and also in the corners, right? So this is cool to have. So if I go back to 4, you can also change the random seed, of course, and animate this value to have random seed and have different random distribution for these values. So this is really cool, nice to randomly turn any distribution with the Formula Effector. So if I remove this, just know for your convenience that you can also benefit from shortcuts. So let's redo this same thing. So I will click on the Grid Cloner with this font selected, add new glyph, select your maybe another shape of arrows, these guys. Okay, you select it again, go to Effector. If I go over my mouse cursor and I read what it's written there, you can see that there are 2 shortcuts. You can either shift click this option and it will select 1 clone over 2, so the end selection mode. And if I hold down the Alt and the Shift key while clicking this button, it will select the random direction mode instead. So let's do that. So if I Shift and Alt click on this guy, and if I click on this, it will automatically randomize the direction for my clones, which is very convenient. And if I undo that, and if I just shift click on this button now, it will affect 1 clone over 2 with a nice parameter set to 0 on position Y. and the style be on this option here, which can be changed, of course. Maybe you don't want this guy to be changed in color, but you can still click this option, and maybe you just want to offset or select a glyph, a specific glyph in this font, so you can do something like that. You can also maybe transform and have a full 120% rotation if needed, or rescale them, or I don't know, maybe something like that, or even skew them, or turn their visibility off by playing with visibility to 0, and you have now like a honeycomb or brick distribution, which is also nice to have. So this is it for the new Formula Effector. As you can see, it's really way more powerful than before, so don't hesitate to use it. It's really cool to have. There are also two brand new effectors in the Effectors tab, which is called Mask Effector and Shader Effector. Let's start with the Mask Effector, but before demonstrating that, I have to create a new text layer or a new cloner. So I will take the grid cloner for this demonstration. So select it and go in the Effectors tab and click on Mask. So as soon as you do that, you will end up with some new stuff, which are like usually the Effector mask effect itself, plus the Effector mask animator that is attached to this effect, right? So please do not rename things with MoglyphFX. But you also have a mask that has exactly the same name than the name of the effect that is attached to, and you have the same color for this mask. As you can see, this is a color label that is bright pink, you see here. And if I have a look at the Effector mask, the parameter and the style, you have the exact same color than for the mask label here, that is affected to the style, fill color and stroke color. And this is why you have this nice preview here that is coherent with that is pretty consistent with the which is consistent between the color of the mask itself and the color of the effector itself. And you also have another layer, a second layer called Moglyph Cloner Grid, which is, as you may notice, the exact same name as the cloner or the text layer you had selected before, and with between brackets, square brackets, the name matrix. So it's locked and it's great. So please do not remove this layer. It's mandatory for the Mask Effector to work. And how does it work? So you have to select your cloner or your text layer on which you have created your Mask Effector. And if now I select the mask, I can now move the points of my mask. I can also animate this, and it will correctly affect the clones coherently. So if I type M on my keyboard, if I can animate the shape of my mask, for example, so I can do something like that, and maybe something like that. So you can animate with mask as you would animate any mask in After Effects. And if I play the preview, I have this animation that affects the clones progressively based on the place of the path points. So this is great. I can reduce the preview area just like this. And yeah, you have this nice animation, which is incredibly cool because you couldn't do that before with previous versions of MoglyphFX. I mean, you couldn't do spatial-based animation like this. And there are a few things to know for the Mask Effector. So the first thing to know is that the Mask Effector works based on the anchor point, so the exact center of each clone. So if you have the impression that some clones aren't affected correctly, this may be due to the anchor point not being included inside the mask. And it will be even simpler to realize if we go in the effector mask, if we go in the effector itself, and if I play with the mask feeder, that I can zero out like this. And now, as you can see, you have all the clones that are effectively contained inside the mask that are colorized and rescaled, because yeah, the default values have this color from the mask itself, but also some transform scale X and scale Y that is minus 50% on both axes, and this is why the clones are resized a bit. So yeah, if you go one frame further, as you can see, this clone here, based on its anchor point, which is right there, isn't inside this mask, so it won't be affected. So this is important to know, that all this is based on the center itself of the clones. And yeah, you can still play with mask feeder. Small values will create a subtle effect, or you can have a big feeder like that and have really a progressive transition between the clones. If you go too far, and if your shape is really small, like this one, it's not that big, this circle by default. So if you have something maybe like that, you still have a bit of animation here, really subtle, but this is because the circle is too small. So you have to, if I unanimate my path, I can maybe, if this is a mask feeder with this value I want, I can just resize this mask effector, and as you can see, you have now something that is way more progressive, right? So this is pretty cool. And yeah, if I undo that, and if I go with something like 200 for the mask feeder, and yeah, by the way, if you twill down the effector mask itself, as you can see, the progressive contour of the mask, so the feeder of the mask, is bound to this mask feeder value. So this is why you have an expression. You can't change this manually. Okay, so you have also the ability to have more precision in a Bezier mask. So this is why there is this value here. This is useful if you have some problems with some clones not being inside, not being affected even if they are inside the mask. It may be due to the Bezier path not having sufficiently some points along the path. So in this case, you could increase this value and try seeing what's going on. But usually a value of 4 is sufficient. So usually you won't touch to this value. And you have a final option that is called outside mask that allows you to have the exact inverse of this effect here, which is by default to be inside the mask, but if I click outside mask, I will affect all the clones that aren't inside the mask. And if you have some clones that are inside the mask that are being affected, this is due to mask feeder here. So if you have 0, you will see that all the clones that aren't inside the mask are being affected, right? So again, this is very based on the anchor point of the mask. So if I just put this mask a little bit on the right, it won't be affected, where this one will be affected, right? So yeah, very cool. I can also, if I undo that, I will undo that a few times. I can also stack multiple masks on top of them. So the first one will be pink, but if I add another mask by selecting my cloner again, I don't have to select any other layer. This is only the cloner I have to select. So it will work with text layers too, by the way. So select your cloner again, twirl up everything to keep your effect stack TD up. So select it and click on the mask again, and now you have a second mask that has been added that is called Effector Mask 2 with a corresponding effect there that has the exact same color for the color and same color for the mask preview and mask label. So if I now select this mask and move it elsewhere, you will see that now everything is mixed up. So this is pretty nice. You can mix your motion based on different masks. You can animate the mask. You can have a mask feeder for this one and not for the others, for example. So this one, as you can see, hasn't got any feeder, while the first one, which is pink, has some feeder, and you can animate the path, of course, for both of them. And you can also have a third one, so I can select it and add a third one, and the third one will be green. So if I have a look at my third mask, it will be green, and I can have up to 5 different masks with this same technique. So if I click again, I have a fourth one, which will be cyan blue, and if I click fifth time on the mask, I can have more masks, but the idea of colorizing the different masks with different colors will stop after the fifth one. So I can go up to 5 different masks, and it will be a different color each time, like a rainbow color. So it really helps to see what's going on in your masks and to understand how things works together. So this is pretty cool because now I have full control over what's going on in each mask. So if, for example, in the cyan here, so the fourth mask, I don't want to rescale them, I can go to transform, I can zero the scale. I maybe don't want to colorize it neither, or maybe I want another color, so something like red. And maybe I can even change the glyph inside there. So I can offset the glyph or modify the glyph to have something custom. So maybe I want a perfect circle instead of a square. So I can type 51, which is the number of the glyph that is contained there with this font. So the glyph number 51 is exactly this circle here. And in each intermediate values, which is due to the progressive aspect of the mask feeder here, there will be chosen some glyphs based on the progressive here. So you have this one and this one, if I have a look, chosen because there is this mask feeder. But if I remove the mask feeder on this one, I will end up with just circles for theirs. And yeah, you can animate and go further with these effects there. And if I choose maybe to affect the clones in this range, I can really be specific and choose exactly what I want for each mask. So pretty cool effect, pretty powerful techniques. It works really well, but again, please do not remove the matrix that is attached to your cloner, otherwise it will be completely broken. Again, as a reminder, if you want to remove some masks, please select your mask in the effect stack here, not anywhere else, and go to other tab and click on remove effect. And it will be removing both the Mask Effector itself and the corresponding mask here, which is pretty convenient. So if you select the mask 4, 3, 2, and even the first one and select the remove effect in the other tab, you will end up with perfectly cleaned cloner. And if I go back to Effectors, just so you know, you have also some convenient shortcuts. So if I go over with my mouse cursor, it's written that if you shift click this button, you will end up with a linear feathered diagonal mask. And if you hold down, the shift alt key while clicking this button, you will end up with a straight square, so no feather. Maybe it's easier to deal with polygons and add points and remove points to have triangles, for example, or polygons. If you have a straight square and not a feather Bezier circle, so it could be useful for that. So yeah, if I select my grid cloner, if I shift click, as you can see, it will create perfectly diagonal big square. So I can move that, and if I move that this way, I can animate my mask like I would animate a linear fall off in Cinema 4D, for example. And it allows you to have one state and to go the full other state just by going on 45 degrees like this. If I do not want the 45 degrees, I can still double click on my mask and turn it with shift key to have a big square like this, and I can now move this guy and animate this to have a perfect linear fall off. And of course, this is due to the effector mask feeder. That is this progression here, this progressive animation. I can go further and have something that is really smooth by going on that way. Okay, so you have something that isn't affected at all right now, and now if I go there, I have something that is perfectly affected. If this isn't sufficient with such a big amount of feather, you have to increase the size of your square mask effector. Square mask, sorry. So now if I go there, it's not affected, and I can go there and animate my mask progressively to have something that is very smooth. So maybe I can quickly show you how to animate. So create a key here and a key there, and boom, it's down. Okay, so I preview the animation, and you have a perfect linear fall off, like just like in Cinema 4D, right? So this is pretty nice. So if I select my mask again, go to other tab, remove the effect, I can now shift and alt key. I can hold down this shift and the alt key together, and clicking this button again. Sorry, I have to select the cloner first. So hold down the shift and the alt key together, and now click on this button. And now you have not a Bezier circle, but a perfect square with just 4 straight points. It's easier to deal with this one if you want to create, let's say, a triangle. So you can go there in the Bezier tool, go here with a little minus icon next to my cursor, and I can remove some points if needed, and go maybe there and add some Bezier points if needed, or go there and have a perfect triangle if needed. So you can create such distribution. Imagine that you want to have a perfect T letter, for example. You can have something like that. So you have T letter made of this square in this grid, and you have here your T letter, right? So this is nice. You can also add some additional points by doing that. Okay, if you want even more precision, so you can do that, and yeah, a last point. And yeah, this is pretty cool. Last thing I like to have is to select the path of this effector and go to the window menu and click on create nulls from path, and you can click on points follow nulls, sorry. And now if I create a new null, and if I parent all the nulls that come from this create nulls from path that are yellow labeled here. I can parent them to my null, and now if I rotate this, I can rotate the path of my mask and I can achieve nice animations. So imagine you don't have a T letter but a star shape maybe. You can create nice stuff like that. I can undo that again. Last thing I like to do is to, if I create a solid, okay, if I double click on the star here, let's say something like that. Okay, I can copy and paste the path of my mask. So I will copy that inside the path of my effector mask. So now, instead of having a T letter, I have this nice shape that I can play with. Something like that. Okay. Of course, it may not be the best example because yeah, I don't have a sufficient amount of clones to showcase the star. But if I add a few more counts in X and Y by going back in the Moglyph Cloner object, count X and count Y, if I increase these values here, it will start to be a bit more slow, so it's totally normal. And I can play with, maybe it's a bit too much for this one too. I need some centered clone, so I will type 7 instead of 8. Okay, be careful because the mask will move based on the anchor point, so this is normal too. And yeah, I can select this, go there, so that I can take the clones. Okay. So as I said, it's a bit slower, but now I have something that I can work with. And now if I redo my my operation from before, I can go to the effector mask by typing M, select the path, go to the window, create nulls from path, and click on points follow nulls again. And now let's add a new null from scratch, and I will parent all the yellowish yellow labeled nulls from the script, parent them to my null, which is perfectly centered in the comp, and I can now, sorry, it will begin to be a bit slow. I can now keyframe the rotation of my main null and have something that is maybe a duration of 2 seconds and have a full turn. Okay, something like this. And now if I preview my animation, as you can see, it will be a bit slow to compute. This is totally normal because it has to calculate the position of each clone in my cloner. So be careful and mind your glyph count. Don't have too much count in your setups, otherwise it will be a nightmare to deal with. And once you have done that, you have a nice animation made of a star that is rotating. And this just couldn't be achieved before in previous versions of MoglyphFX. So yeah, the Mask Effector is a wonderful new addition to the MoglyphFX toolset. I have created a simple fractal noise loop of 5 sequence onto a new solid called fractal noise. And let's say that I want in the luminance, so the white pixels of this fractal noise, to animate clones in a Moglyph Cloner setup. Let's say change their color, rescale them, rotate them, change glyphs, and so on. So I can do that by first creating a cloner. So I will create a grid cloner in this case, and I will stick with the default 5x5 grids for now. And the way it works is that you'll have to select first your cloner layer or your text layer. Then secondly, select the source you want your clone to be based onto. So select with shift click the second layer, which is in my case the fractal noise. And then you can click on this Shader Effector button. And you will end up immediately with this kind of animation. It will be a bit slow to preview, so let's take some time to preview that. And as you can see, you can clearly see that where you have some blue values, some bluish values with little squares, this is where you have lightness, so pixels that tend to be white, while in the black spots of the fractal noise, you keep the clones as they were before applying the shader effector, so you keep the greenish color and the initial scale of the clones in the black spots. So this is exactly what I wanted. And let's analyze how it works. So first you can notice that it works exactly the same than for the Mask Effector. So once you click on a Shader Effector for a cloner, you end up with a second layer that is named exactly the same than the MoglyphF cloner itself, plus between square brackets the word matrix inside the brackets. And please do not touch to this, because otherwise it will break entirely the setup. So if I click on the MoglyphF cloner grid, I can now analyze what's going on in the effector shader. So twill down the effector, and the parameters, by the way, are set to be in transform scale minus 50% on both X and Y scale axis. This is why they are smaller in white spots, and the color is bluish by default, but I can stick, if I prefer, with the green color by checking this option. But let's keep the blue color for now because it's easier to see what's going on. Of course, you can change all that and maybe just offset the glyph if you want to. Let's say something like that, for example. And by the way, as a reminder, if you offset the glyph, it means that by default it was a perfect square because I am in the Moglyph basic geometry. And if I click on Add New Glyph, the very first glyph you have in this font is this perfect square. So before applying Shader Effector, without touching to offset glyph, I was having a perfect square that was exactly this glyph number 1. But if I choose offset glyph, if I type 13, it will go up to the 13th glyph, which is this one. Okay, so in values that are perfectly white, the glyph will become exactly this one. Sorry. Okay, so because this is 13 plus the glyph number 1, so this is this one at the end. So 13 in offset glyph means that in white I will have this value. Okay, for the reminder, so I will zero this one out. Of course, I can do more things like maybe rotate the clones if needed. Okay, something like that. But let's undo that for now. And yeah, so the options that for the effector shader are pretty simple. You have only the way to change the layer map, because right now I have a fractal nose selected because this is the second layer I had selected before clicking on the shader layer. But you can change that after a while, because it could be useful for you to first set up something with one type of animation and one type of map. But you could want to duplicate your setup and to change the source afterwards. So this is why this shader layer map is there. So don't hesitate to play with all the kind of stuff not bound to use fractal noise, of course. You can imagine to, for example, have radar radial ramp, for example, that is rotating. This is just an idea, but yeah, you are of course free to use anything you want, as soon as it is based on luminance. Speaking of luminance, it works on luminance by default because the map color channel is set to luminance, but you can choose something else. If you select red, green, blue, or alpha, it will indeed base the motion of the clones based on the corresponding channel, right? So before demonstrating this, I will just show you the invert map. That is just a way to fastly and easily invert the effect of this effector shader, because right now everything is affected, so turning the clones blue and make them smaller in white spots, but you could want the exact inverse. So you could want these to happen in black spots there. So just click on invert map in this case, and it will invert the whole thing. Okay, so now in the white spots, the squares will remain green and at their initial state of size, while in the black spots, like there, they will recite them smaller and becoming and they will become bluish, right? So this is convenient to have this option. Let's untick this for now. And yeah, to explain the luminance versus the other channels, let's change a few things in the fractal noise. Right click, add a color correction and tritone. The tritone can convert black and white values to 3 different colors. I can go in the light tones in a plain red color. In the middle tones, I can go with plain green color. So this exact color, which is exactly 255 in the value of green and 0 in red and blue. And in the dark tones, I can have a plain blue, which is exactly 0 in red and green and 255 in blue. So I have now this nice remapping of my colors. And now if I reactivate my Moglyph Cloner with its effector shader, as you can see, you have only bluish and same size for all the clones, and this is because the map color channel is still on luminance. And just for you to know, red, blue, and green have almost the same luminance. But now if I choose red, as you can see now, I only affect my clones, so the blue and rescaled clones there, only in the red spots, and everything else is ignored. If I choose green, I will only affect where I have some green, and if I choose blue, I will only affect my clones where I have blue spots here. So this is nice to have full control over your effector shader. And yeah, just there is one thing to know when using Shader Effector. This is that you really have to be careful with the values you put in the count of your cloners, because the Shader Effector is really by far the slowest to compute of all the effectors of MoglyphFX, because it has to calculate for each frame the sample image expression, which is initially very slow in After Effects, and for each clone. So if you have a grid of 5 by 5, you have this slow preview, but imagine you have double this count, so maybe 10 by 10, it will still work, but it will be really slow to compute. So as you can see, it works as expected, but it's maybe I will reduce the gap to not have any gap, but as you can see, it becomes very slow both preview and to interact with. So yeah, mind your count when using the shader effector. This is very important. If I try to preview that right now, it will be very long, and it's normal. That is due to After Effects native slowness with a sample image expression. But it will work anyway, and just for you know, it's easier to render this than to preview this, and I encourage you to maintain the Shift key on the cap lock on your keyboard so that you don't have to preview your animation while rendering the animation. So you have for now this kind of animation. As you can see, it works well, but it's way slower. So yeah, that is something to keep in mind while using Shader Effector. And just so you know, if I undo that, I will just remove everything. Okay, so I just have my fractal noise. Let's redo a grid cloner right now. Let's also purge the memory. It's always a good habit to purge memory, especially if you use the Shader Effector. So let's clean that up. And if you have grid cloner with a high value of count on X and Y, so 8 by 8 will give me 64 clones in total. Well, there is a threshold where the Shader Effector is intelligent enough to warn you that it will be slow, and this is the limit, 64 for your information. So if I select this grid cloner and then the fractal noise and try to apply the Shader Effector, you will have this message that will pop up that will say, hey, this cloner text layer generates a big amount of glyphs. If you apply this effector to it, the project will become very slow, so you are all wound, and this is important to know. So yeah, you can still apply it if you click yes, and you can abort the operation if you click no. So if I click yes, it will still work, as you can see there. But yeah, this is very, very important to keep in mind. During the previous lessons, we have already seen a few shortcuts assigned to some of the effectors, like the Mask Effector and the Formula Effector. But you have to know that there are also additional shortcuts for other effectors. So this is a case of the Delay Effector and the Random Effector. And for convenience, just know that I always used the Shift key and the Alt-Shift key in order to add some new presets, okay? Because the Alt key only will be the way to access the description of any button. So if I Alt key on a button, like for example the step button, it will show me the description of what it's doing. But if I go in the Delay Effector, if I go over my mouse cursor, it's written Shift will do an elastic scale apparition, and if I hold down Alt and Shift together, it will do a flickering apparition. So let's try this. And for this sake, I will just use Brick Cloner, which is the new name of the Honeycomb Cloner in previous versions. So let's add 3 rows, add a bit spacing. Let's stick with that, for example. So I will select it. And if I apply the Delay Effector with the time cursor here at 0 frame, it will be by default an animation of each clone moving on its y-axis to the value of position y, 100 pixel, and this is why it's doing that motion, right? And the Delay Effector is pretty specific among the other effectors because it is the only one that is able to offset by an absolute value of time each clone sequentially. So I will undo that. And if I now hold down the Shift key with the exact same button, look at what it creates now. So if I preview the animation, yeah, you have now this nice bouncing scale animation down with one single click, which is really awesome because this preset is one of the animation I may do the most as a motion designer. So just imagine you don't have some squares, but you can have anything. It can be letters by letters. It can be if you have in a text layer, but you can also replace these squares by maybe if I take Moglyph UI element, select my cloner again and add some maybe some folders here. All right, so you have these nice folders and you have this nice animation done with one click, right? So this is very, very interesting. And if I undo all this until I don't have the animation from the delay effector, I can show you the last shortcut, which is now the Shift and Alt key held down together. So if I hold down Shift and Alt on the keyboard and I click on this button, it will do now not an elastic scale animation, but a flickering animation, which is also very cool for all kind of sci-fi or HUD stuff. So I love this flicker animation a lot. And again, this is achieved with one single click. So if you have something that is cooler than these bricks with these basic squares, like let's make something a bit more interesting there. So maybe I can have something like that, and maybe add more spacing to that. Okay. Actually, let's stick with 4. Okay. And yeah, I can maybe use in the other tab some symmetry. So I can Shift Alt click this button and it will do an horizontal and vertical symmetry all together. So if I now play the animation, you have this animation that is perfectly uniform in all directions. I can, for example, let's say flip the animation on both sides. So now it will do this animation in this order. And yeah, this is pretty nice. Of course, I can replace the squares by anything I want. For example, I want to make HUD stuff, so I will choose the futuristic HUD font, this one, and maybe populate this with nice icons. Like what can I add there? I can add maybe this guy here plus this thing, and already you can see that it's pretty cool what I can achieve with just that. And maybe a last stuff with yeah, this one maybe. Okay, and I can choose to not iterate but randomize, and let's play with the different values here. Okay, with the seed. And now, since everything is symmetrized, I have this cool animation achieved with a few seconds, which is really awesome. So this is pretty cool. I really love this flickering animation. So let's re-demonstrate this really quickly. So if I click on a grid cloner, let's choose basic geometry. Let's add a square. Okay, I can go to Effectors, Shift Alt click on this button, and it will do my flickering animation. And just so you know, it is by default down by order of indices, but you also can go in the effector itself and go in animation order. You can offset the animation more, like maybe 5 frame offset between each clone. Okay, great. And you are not bound to have this ordered animation. You can choose the ID order, but also to reverse the order. So you have now from the last clones to the very first. You can outward, which is from center to outwards. Okay, which is also a nice way to animate stuff. You can also use inward, which is exactly the inverse. And you can choose random, which is also very cool for any kind of stuff, right? Especially if for techie and HUD kind of designs. So this is it for the two additional shortcuts of the delay effector. Let's undo that. And I want to show you the random shortcuts too. So for this one, I will also create a grid of squares because it's the simplest way to demonstrate that. I will keep that as it is and go to Effectors. If I go over my random button with the cursor, it will show me the help tip that describes how I can use shortcuts. So it's written that with Shift, it will randomize still positions. And if you hold down both Alt and Shift keys together, it will randomize still rotation instead. So by default, if I don't do any shortcuts, it will randomize the scale and the fill hue of my clones, which is pretty cool. And by the way, it's looped perfectly on the comp duration, which is pretty awesome. But if I undo that, now if I select my grid cloner again, and if I shift click on this random effector, I have now a perfectly still distribution of my clones that are just randomly positioned in the comp. And this is due to the transform position X and Y values that I have there. By the way, you can just put same number of your composition size, and you can just play with the effector strength in order for you to keep something that is not displaced at all or to be fully randomized, okay, which is really awesome. And again, this is a still state because I am on a random mode and I have an animation speed that is set to 0. So this is why it's not moving, but of course I can also animate this by choosing another number, and now it will be animated in both directions and at a rate of 2 per second. And of course I can still change the mode to be wiggle, for example, and again it will be looped on the comp duration, which is really nice. So undo that. Let's select your effector random, go to other tab, and remove effect. And now to finish on this, I will select my grid cloner again, and I will this time hold down both the Alt key and the Shift key all together while clicking this button. And now you have the exact same thing than previously, but this is not the position that is affected, but the rotation on Z. So if I drill down the parameters transform here, you don't have any value in position X and Y, but you have the rotation Z set to one full 360 degrees turn. So this is perfect if you want to randomize a few clones really quickly. So just Alt Shift click this random button, and you will end up with this nice random rotation distribution. Of course, you can also select it and apply with a Shift key an additional random effector, and both will remain still because they are set both to animation speed to 0. And yeah, this is a nice way to randomly distribute your clones and maintain them in a still state. So this is it for the shortcuts. Of course, you have seen that the Mask Effector has shortcuts and the Formula Effector has shortcuts as well. And let's finish all this by saying a bit more about these new options you have there. And in order for you to showcase this, I have to maybe not create some glyphs, but create a grid cloner made of full text, so editable text. And for now, I will use not glyph fonts that have these white thumbnails, but the green thumbnails here, and I will take the MoText duplicated words for this. So the last one in the list. So MoText duplicated words selected. Right now I have this greenish W icon in the dropdown. I will go to the grid cloner. I end up with this nice distribution of the same word, which is MoglyphFX right now, but I'll double click. I can double click and edit this text to have something I want, maybe hello. And I can have as much count X as I want. So I have 3 columns, but I can have maybe 5 columns in this case. So 5 columns and maybe 8 rows. Okay, cool. I can still play with the Y gap and the X gap. So I will add just a bit more gap here to have perfect distribution in my square. Perfect. So now I have this nice grid made of exactly 40 clones. I can now go to, let's close this one. I can now go to Moglyph Effector and I can apply a Formula Effector. But before, and I can apply a Formula Effector. If I apply the Formula Effector right now without doing anything else, as you can see, the animation will be based on glyphs. So it will be based by letters. It will be based on characters. Okay, so it gives me this nice letter by letter animation. This is nice, and this is because the mode of the effectors is set by default to be on effector per glyph, right? And this is the mode by default. But right now, if I undo that, if I go back to my MoText Cloner, now if I select an effector per word, okay, so now it's effector per word that is chosen in the drop-down list. And if I click now on formula, as you can see, the effect is the same, but it's based now not on letters by letters, but it's now on words by words. And this is really, really nice way to animate text that have different words in them. So this is typically something you would have done with Cavalry. So I really love this effect. And by the way, you can either choose on which you want your animation to be based on before clicking the button, but you can also change it after a while. If you select your effector, so this is the effector formula, I want to change the mode to, so I will select it in the effect stack. And then if I select another mode, like maybe effector per line, it will now change on the fly on which the effector formula will be based on. So now it's based on line because I've chosen line. And it's working only because the effector formula was chosen in the stack of effects. And now if I select it again and go back to per glyph, it will do the animation letter by letter just like before. And by the way, this is the default value. And yeah, this is pretty cool. And just as a reminder, the effector formula can still be deployed here. Curve animation, frequency, I can decrease that way more and have something that is yeah, more like a will wave if I change this setting. So this is pretty cool. And this option is the mod of the effectors and will work with all the effectors that are based on expression based. So plane effector isn't concerned, nor the group. Time effector neither. Mask and shader neither, but you can use this option with delay effector, formula effector, random effector, step effector. Yeah, this is pretty cool addition. And this option is not to be is not the same than this similar one that is pink on its right. So this one is for effector based changes, and this is blue icons because icons of effectors are all bluish. And if you change something that is pink in its color, it means that you will change the fall off of the effectors. And this is different because let's see how it works. If I select this exact same effector formula, if I twirl up this guy and twirl down this fall off subgroup, and if I play now with the completion 2 and I decrease this option, as you can see, progressively I will reduce the influence of the formula effector. Okay, so consider these fall off options to be like range selection in normal text layer, because this is just a range selector. Okay, so and completion from is the start and completion 2 is the end of fall off. So just to see a bit better what's going on here, I will just uncheck the color to have some red and blue color here, so I can clearly see what's going on in the selection of my formula effector. And yeah, if I play with this completion 2, as you can see for now, this is based on characters 2, right? So if I type maybe 61, okay, and if I zero out the smoothness, as you can see, the stop effect, the fall off is stopping between the E here and the L there. So it means that it follows the index of the clones and of the letters. But you can change that by clicking on this button here. And again, it can be set before clicking the effectors or after a while. So now that my effector formula is all set up, I can select it in my stack of effects, and I can click this 1, 2, 3 toggle button. And now it means that it will completely randomize the fall off options. So this is like if you had manually twirled down the fall off and activated the random mode, right? So this is really cool. So I can, with the effector formula still selected, I can still go back and forth the index based and the random. And as you can see, if I am based on indices like that, the little guy here is grayed out, so you can't play with that. But as soon as I click on that and I am in the random toggle mode, I have this last button called randomize the effector's fall off random source. And if the effector formula is still selected, I can still click on that button and it will immediately on the fly randomize the seed, the source of this randomize. As you can see here, the number changes on the fly. And what is cool is that if you have several effectors selected in the stack of effects, it will all this will affect all the effectors all at once. So this is pretty cool way to interact with your effectors in an easy and convenient way. Okay, so I will stick with the index by now. And yeah, last thing I want to show you, maybe I will remove the formula effector right now. So I will remove the effect. And yeah, if I just apply a plain effector and I twill down the fall off options, I can just go there and decrease the completion too. I can go to parameters, and I do not want to change the position Y, which is why the words are moving towards the top of the composition. So let's type 0 here. And now I just have a color, and the color is due to style, colors from Cloner, checked off. Okay, so this is nice. Maybe we can just rescale the things a bit. So I will type -25, for example, -25, or maybe something bigger. Yeah, actually, let's make something bigger. So 35. Okay, so now if I select my layer again, I can choose to affect the fall off differently. So by default, the fall off is by glyph, so by letter, it means for a text layer, because the default option is fall off per glyph. But if I choose with this effector plane selected another kind of fall off, let's say fall off per word, as you can see now, if I go in the completion to, if I play with this option, it will animate per word, okay, which is pretty cool. And you can also change it to be based on line. If you go back to this option here, which is the pink one, fall off per line, and there I have this animation that is now per line, and it will immediately also change the anchor point to be based on line and not on character. So this is why the line increases its size in overall size. And yeah, this is pretty cool. I can then play in the completion offset and have some animations like that. And by the way, if I decrease the smoothness to be 0, and if I go back to effector plane and change it back to fall off per glyph, and maybe reduce the range by playing with this option here. So maybe something like that. Yeah, as you can see, I am using perfectly square range, and this is the next option that is right there that show you that you are in the square fall off. Okay, this is a square shape, and this is the default one. So if you decrease the smoothness of the fall off to 0, you will have this hard cut between the two states. But if you select again your effector and effector, and if you change that on the fly, like maybe choosing the random up fall off, and you have now some nice thumbnails that illustrate that, you can see that now you have a progression from this same place to this place here, and you can have a really nice organic transition between one state to the other, which is pretty cool. And you can of course have the inverse by choosing the ramp down fall off. Okay, so same thing, you can just play with this option and it will immediately change the way it's progressively transitioning. And you can also change for triangle fall off. You have this nice little thumbnail that helps you understand what's going on. So maybe it's not the best way to illustrate this. Actually, for illustrating those advanced shape, I will just click on this linear cloner. Sorry, I will click with a single square. I will shift alt click on this, scroll down the object, percept transform, zero out the position Y, and add more, maybe 20, 25, let's do not touch to the per step. And scroll down the transform group and rescale all the clones to be 25% on each axis. And in per steps transform, I will reduce the gap between them. And yeah, if I select it and go to Effectors. If I keep that triangle fall-off selected and click on Plane Effector, as you can see, you can immediately see what's going on here. So if I go to fall-off, and if I decrease the smoothness to 0, and if I take a completion here, so in order to clearly see that, you also have to zero out the is high and is low. Okay, and now you have the exact shape you have there in the icons. So this is a triangle fall off. You have also the round fall off, and you have also the smooth fall off. I love the smooth fall off because if I decrease the completion to, I have now a way to clearly have a really nice organic motion between my clones just by playing with the completion offset here. So yep, this is it for the different new options you have at the bottom of the Effectors tab. You may have noticed the nice looping animation I had used for the introduction of this video overview. Well, here they are again. And as you can see, there are a lot of different use cases for MoglyphFX because yeah, every single one of these animations has been done with MoglyphFX solely. So as you can see, there are some 3D extruded text, there are some chunky text animations, some animated patterns. Maybe you will be interested in creating particle-like effects like this one, gradient along path like these two ones, or UI interactive stuff like this macOS dock menu or interactive cursor. In order for you to find this new feature, you'll have to go to MoglyphFX in the third last tab called Other. So this one, you can click on Demo Project. And if you click on Demo Project, you will have a big list on the left sidebar that lists all the demo projects I've created and the one you have seen in this nice looping grid previously. So it's conveniently sorted alphabetically. So you just have to browse the list like that, or you can just select one item and maybe use the up and down arrow on the keyboard in order to cycle through the list. And as you can see, as I do that, you can see some nice thumbnails here that show what project you will be importing, and you have also attached to each item a nice description of what it's doing and how it's working. And you also have some animated previews attached to them, but you have to see the reference online because unfortunately After Effects UI scripts can't play GIF animation there. So you can, for example, if I'm interested in importing this bicycle chain loop, I can see a reference online by clicking this button. And in this case, it will open an animated loop on the web browser. Usually, you'll end up on my Dribbble account where I have posted all these animations as GIF animations. So this is nice if you want to preview with animation. And for each item, you also have the fonts that are used in the MoglyphFX setup. So in this case, I can see that these circles here in this animation use the Moglyph Basic Geometry font, which is one of the default fonts delivered with the product. Sometimes you'll find that some of the projects use any font. This is because it's not a MoglyphFX font, but you can use your own font instead, so it can be any system font. You also have the cloners that are used in this project. So in this case, for example, for this nice DNA project, I know that it will be the grid cloner that is used. And you also have the effectors that are used in the setup. So in this case, for the DNA strand, this is the formula, but sometimes you'll have more than one effectors, like this one, for example, where I use random formula and plain effectors. And yeah, the last thing you'll find in the informations on the right is the minimum AE version you have to use in order for you to import this project. So in this case, for example, you can see that it's 22.4. So it's okay for me to import that because this is a version that is superior to this version. But if you, let's say, are in 23 version of After Effects, and if you have something that is later, like this one, for example, which is 2025 version, if I'm right, you will see a little warning sign next to the version number. And it indicates you that you won't be able to use and to import this project in your current version of After Effects because it's not compatible, right? So the number of the version here is the minimum AE version, and it's important for you to know. There is also another way to browse this long list. Actually, there are exactly 50 projects to import and to play with, which is already a big number, but you can expect to have more of them in the future. And if you want to kind of filter them, you can by just type keywords here in the top search field. And if I search, for example, by the cloner type, so let's say I'm searching for the old Fibonacci cloner, which is now renamed in version 4 Spiral Cloner. So I can type Fibo, and I will then filter all my projects to find only the projects that use the Fibonacci cloner, so the Spiral Cloner now. So even if this word isn't appearing fully in the name of the projects, as you can see, there isn't any Fibonacci word in these projects. I can still filter them thanks to that. And I can also filter by effectors. So if I search, for example, for formula, I will find all the projects that are using formula. As you can see, there are a lot of them. And I can also search for time. And in this case, there are way less projects to deal with. So this one is using the time effector, for example, even if it's called bleeding path effect. And I have also hard-coded some useful keywords for you to filter them more efficiently. So if I search, for example, UI, I can find any project that is related to UI and layout. If I search, for example, web, I can find only the projects that are related to website applications and interactivity. So you have a cursor, you have an HUD, you have a gradient loader, and you can search for any kind of word. Maybe you could also find nice particles stuff. So particles, yeah, I've attached the particle keyword to a few of the projects. So you have the bubbling magic particles, you have fire and smoke VFX, fireworks, light speed tunnel loop, matrix particle rain, sparkling particles falling from path, twirling debris lost in space. Again, even if particles isn't in the name itself, you can still find it thanks to this hard-coded keywords. So it's pretty cool to have this option to filter them. And now you have see all this, you can import that. So to import a project, just select it. Okay, so it has to be highlighted either with by clicking with the mouse or by going up and down in the list with the keyboard. And once you have selected a project, like maybe this one, you can just click on the import selected project. Typing enter on the keyboard will also work. And now you have, as you can see, imported the whole projects in your project folder. And it has been conveniently organized inside a MoglyphFX assets folder. And just for you to know, if you go back to demo project in the other tab, and if you import another project, let's say the DNA helix loop, for example, I can type enter again. It will also be put inside the MoglyphFX asset folder. So every single composition you want from there. And by the way, you can close this window with escape. and every single one will be put in this MoglyphFX assets, which is very convenient to keep your project well organized. So as you can see, it is fully workable and editable. I can kind of try learning from that and maybe retro-engineer how it has been done. So maybe I can analyze this one a bit. I can, for example, turn down these post effects. And as you can see, in all these examples I've included in the project, you will maybe notice that I don't use adjustment layers that you can create from there. So it's not a normal adjustment layer. It's always a shape layer that is just a rectangle. So if I uncheck this little guy here, you can see that it's just a rectangle that is the size of the composition. And I prefer to work like this with this option turned on because it doesn't need you to create any solid dependencies. So it keeps the project really light and you don't have solids in there. So there you won't find any null object, any solids, nor any adjustment layers in this project here. So just know that. And yeah, the post effects are just a few post effects with metable applied thanks to this post effects from MoglyphFX itself. And under that you have two cloners. You have this DNA bonds that are just rectangles that are symmetrized. Again, it has been symmetrized thanks to the symmetry post effects in MoglyphFX. And if I turn off these guys here, and if I turn off the formula, as you can see, this is just a rectangle glyph with a stroke. And then with the Formula Effector, I just rescale them with wave animation. And if I do the same with the position of two columns of circles, I can now have them stacked onto each other. And I can now add a postfix onto this, and with the metable effect and a bit of glow effect and so color correction, I can have this nice looping DNA trend animation. So you can retro-engineer every single of these animations I've included in the demo project library, and it will help you understand the power and the flexibility of MoglyphFX. So, and of course you can reuse them also for your needs. So if I want, for example, to have maybe, yeah, this editable chunky text glitch anim is also very cool. So I can click on import selected project. And now if I try to edit this text layer by double clicking this, I can type something in lowercase like motion design made simple with MoglyphFX. Okay, and I can still play with the anchor point in order to center this, for example. And if I play the animation, you'll have this nice chunky type animation in 3D, which is very, very cool to have and to edit and to reuse in your own project. So this is one of the many examples you'll find. And I strongly advise you to have a look at each of them and to read the description in order to fully understand what's going on and to launch them in your projects to play with. By the way, I had not spoken about this one in the introduction, but you have also some nice futuristic HUDs, like maybe this one is really cool. So if you are in the tech stuff and HUDs and sci-fi style, maybe you could be interested in all this kind of composition, so don't hesitate to play with. And you have some particles like effect. The bubbling magic particles is also very flexible and very interesting to have. Here, if you type U on the keyboard, you will see that I've just changed the glyph ID in order to fully change the particle shape. Here you have like little stars. Here you have more complex stars. Here you have some animated sprites of particles, like Disney-like sprites, which are very nice too. And here you have like bokeh effects By the way, you also have some bokeh effect in, if I'm right, I can type bokeh. Yeah, it's fairy lights on hanging connections. So if I type this and import this one is very complex, so I will not explain all this. I have done this for my end of the year greetings, so I will just turn off everything except the MoglyphFX Cloner Spiral Bokeh FX, and you can reuse that. Okay, so the Spiral Bokeh FX is just a Fibonacci cloner, so a spiral cloner, this one, and it's animated with a few effectors like random, formula with the new sawtooth curve we have already seen, and I've texturized them a bit with some fractal noise, some vector blur, some glow, and some fast box blur. And yeah, you have a very nice and convincing bokeh effect that you can reuse. So very cool, interesting effect. And yeah, just play with everything and you'll see a lot of cool stuff you can reuse. And now that I've showcased this demo project library, you may have noticed that when I go over this demo projects button, there is a help tip that says to me that with the Shift key, I can create a new Moglyph cursor in ActiveComp. So this Moglyph cursor is actually one of the available projects. If you type cursor, you will find the Moglyph cursor here. So if I try to launch it, and once you have imported that, you will end up with this really nice animation that showcase the possibilities of the Moglyph cursor. So the Moglyph cursor is the green layer, which is this nice mouse cursor that is this white arrow here. And if you type U on the keyboard in order to see its keyframes, you may notice that there aren't that much keyframes regarding the animation we have, because right now, if the mouse is passing over the star at this moment exactly, you can see that there aren't any keyframe to change the shape of the cursor. And this is because the Moglyph cursor is smart enough to automatically change depending of referenced layers. And we will see that later, but just know that the over FX there in the Moglyph cursor effect can reference up to 10 layers. And as you can also see, there are only a few old keyframes on the source text of the Moglyph cursor that will trigger the click animation. So the wall click animations are all done with one single keyframe. So if I add a new keyframe in the text source, as you can see, it's creating a new click animation with the scale and a nice radar-like effect like this, which is pretty cool. And I will show you how all this works in a few seconds. Another thing that you can do with this composition is to reuse the interactive animations I've put on some of the elements, like this nice rescaling and rotating star. So if you click on it, you can type EE on your keyboard, and you will see that there are some expressions that are linked to some sliders effects that you can copy and reuse anywhere in order to react to your layer, which is pretty cool. And in order for me to further explain how to use the shortcut assigned to this demo project button, which is Shift, and to bring the Moglyph cursor inside your own composition, I will create a new composition from scratch. So let's create a new comp, click OK, and for this example, I will just create a few buttons with the shape layer. So I will create a shape layer with some rectangles right now. I can also create some solids. So I will do that with maybe a red solid with button-like dimensions, and use that as a button as well. But in order for that to work, you'll have to ensure that this reduce transform option is ticked on for this solid, otherwise it won't work. I can duplicate that and have different buttons here. You can also import your own image, but be careful and unsure to tick on this option here, you can have pre-compositions, you can have footage, videos, images as soon as you have this option ticked on. So once you have done that, imagine you have some menu items here, and you can just select all the layers you want to react with your mouse cursor. So if you go back to the Other tab, if you go to the demo project and you hold down the Shift key on the keyboard, if you click now on this button, you will not open the demo project library panel. You will instead create a new Moglyph cursor layer, which is now just a white arrow. But if I go over one of the layers I had selected, as you can see, now the cursor changes to this nice pointing hand, which is very cool and very nice in order to have convincing mouse cursor animations. And in order for you to better see, I will uncheck the control of the layers here in the view options. And now if I move my cursor, as you can see, it reacts accordingly to the layers I had chosen. And this is because I had chosen and selected these layers before clicking with a shift click on this button. Moglyph cursor has a Moglyph cursor effect that you can drill down here, and if you go in the Over FX, you will see that all of the layers I had selected are now referenced in the React with Layers list here. You can go up to 10 layers to react with, just know that. And yeah, it has been automatically populated for you because you had selected them before. Of course, you can reference all the layers after a while. So if I create a new button here with the shape layer, of course, by now, it won't react with the Moglyph cursor if I don't specify to be an overlayer. But if I now go to my Moglyph cursor and if I drill down the Over FX again, I can see that the React with layer 5 is actually already used. I can go then to React with layer 6, and now I can choose the correct layer, which is this one, and now it will react to this layer too, which is cool. And by the way, just so you know, you can also auto-animate some clicks. So let me uncheck this layer controls again. And if you want to animate some clicks, you just have to type U on your keyboard. So Moglyph cursor selected, you type U, and you can see that there is only one single keyframe, which is there. And this is a keyframe on the source text of this layer, because yeah, the cursor is a text layer, okay? So if you animate the source text, it will automatically animate the click option. So if I create a new keyframe here, it will be animated. And now I have one click, two click, and I can add even more click after a while. I can animate double click by having two keyframes that are very close to each other. And this is how you add some clicks in your animation. And of course, if you are over a button, you will have the click happening with the pointing mouse shape, which is pretty cool too. And just so you know, you can also deploy the Moglyph cursor effects, and you have also some other interesting options to play with. You have the normal state of the cursor, that is a white arrow by default, but you can also change it to be a black arrow. So in this case, you won't see it because I'm on a black background, but if I change the color of the background to be gray, for example, you have now a black arrow. So here you have white arrow, you have pointing hand, you have dragging hand if you need that to mimic the behavior of some dragging elements. You can have an open hand, you can have a typing text, which is also very nice if you want to animate the cursor over a text field. You have a moving tool, and you have a triangle pointer, because this one is pretty popular these days. And yeah, this is all the different shapes you have in the Moglyph cursor. And you can also change the click animation, because right now it is reducing its scale to 64% of its scale, but if I change it, you can have something even smaller. If I uncheck the radar click, as you can see, there is a nice little radar white circle that is animated in scale and opacity. If you don't want that, you can uncheck this option. Of course, please do not remove all the effects that are below, because they are needed for this effect to work. And if you want to change the color of the radar, you can change it with the color here. If I want to have something like the ScreenFlow application on Mac and be red in your circle, you can do that. And if you want to have something that is bigger in relative to the cursor, you can still resize this with this value here. And yeah, this is how you can work with this Moglyph cursor. And yeah, there is also something you can play with, which is the cursor normal size, which is by default 2 times bigger than the normal size of a screen. So this is 200%, but if you type 100, you will have a cursor that is almost the size of a real cursor. So this is it for demo project, and it's a magic cursor, so I hope you'll like it. Now let's have a look at a new feature that I really love a lot, which is the Target Glyph, which is there in the Other tab. In order to demonstrate this, I will just create first a regular grid cloner, and I will just select my cloner and click on Target Glyph. And instantly, as you can see, it has created 2 things. It has created a text animator called Moglyph Target 1 plus Moglyph Target 1 that has exactly the same name. So it's a null layer that is now yellow and that is now sticking to the center of one specific clone that is defined by, if you go on the null itself, you'll find a Moglyph Target Position effect where you'll have the cloner that is referenced here. You can change this cloner after a while if needed. And you have mainly this Target Glyph ID, which is red because there is a clamp expression onto it. So if I target the glyph number ID number 1, it will be this one. If I target the ID number 0, it will be the very first one. If I target the ID number 24, because it's a grid of 5 by 5 minus 1 because the index starts at 0. So this is the very last clone. And of course you can animate from 0 to this clamped value, which allows you to stick the null layer to the cloner that you want exactly. But right now let's analyze what's going on here. So if I see the transparency grid, I can see that this glyph has disappeared, and this is because I played with opacity. So if you have a look at what happens in the Moglyph Target 1, if I drill down this guy here, as you can see, there is an opacity that is set to 0. So this is nice because it just allows you to play with opacity. But this text animator is linked to this option, which is called Hide Target Glyph here. So if I uncheck this option, the glyph reappears, right? So this is important to know if you don't want to hide the clone that you are targeting. In this case, I want to not see it, so I want to hide it. I will click on Hide Target Glyph like it is by default. And this is also important to note that this is a text effector. So if you apply after a while another effector, let's say a Formula Effector, as you can see, if you have a look carefully here, this glyph that was targeted by my Moglyph target reappears with a fading animation, and this is because the formula also plays with opacity. So if you want to animate your clones, you should put your animation, if you drill down your cloner here, before the Moglyph Target 1. And now, as you can see, the opacity overrides the opacity fading from the Effector formula. So this is something to keep in mind. And yeah, what is really cool with this Moglyph Target option is that it can analyze and make any layer stick to any glyph that is also moving thanks to text layers. So this is really incredible. You couldn't do that before. And what's even more interesting is to link any designs to this null. So you can do that manually. If I go back to my cloner and uncheck the little fx guy next to effector formula, I have now a formula effector that isn't doing anything because it's disabled. So if I bring any design, let's say for example this fun little emoji animation, if I take it and just parent it to this Moglyph target null, as you can see, of course, it will stick. And if I change the Moglyph target one to something else in terms of IDs, the layer, of course, will move accordingly. So this is really interesting to do that if you want to stick any design to any animated glyph. And of course, if I re-enable the effector formula that is making the glyphs move as a wave, and of course I can go inside the curve and play with what I've demonstrated before in previous lessons. So maybe something smaller. Yeah, and you have this kind of animation. As you can see, it perfectly follows the animation of the glyph, which is really cool. So if I go here and bring a bit more gap in Y, you can better see what's going on. And just something to keep in mind too, the target glyph only analyzes the position of the glyphs. So it's based on the exact center point of each glyph. So there, 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 and there. And if you animate the rotation of the glyphs, it won't do anything. It will not affect this target glyph since it only analyzes position, right? So just keep that in mind. So if you want to make your clones move, you just have to animate position. And this is what is down by default with the effector formula, because the parameters transform here has a position Y set to 100, right? And yeah, this is very cool. You couldn't do that before. Another thing to know is that this tool is smart enough to let you attach a selected design before. So let's redemonstrate this again. So I will bring back my little guy here. I will just reset its scale to make it smaller. And I will just create a grid again. I will animate the Formula Effector first, again, because this is important. And what is really cool is now that I can select my Moglyph cloner. Then with the Shift key, I can select my design that I want to stick on the cloner's glyph. And now if I go to Other, and if I click on Target Glyph, it will be automatically parented and zeroed out on position, so it will be perfectly at the correct place and will be sticking to the selected glyph ID, which is very awesome. So yeah, very cool effect. And of course you can use any kind of design, footage, video, 3D, etc. and recite them to your needs. You can also, if I go to the cloner again, deactivate the formula, I can select my cloner again and add a second target glyph. In this case, it will create a second text animator called Moglyph Target 2 that will be linked with expressions to another null layer. And this one, if you play with this ID, will also work. And you can also have the two of them working, which is pretty cool because you can then create as much target glyph as needed. So I can add a third one and play with another ID again. If I don't want this glyph to disappear, I can just uncheck for this one only the hide target glyph option. And it means that you can maybe have another emoticon right there and play with it. Okay, just rescale this a bit and put this here and link it manually to this Moglyph Target 3. And now if I move the Target 3 ID, it will move accordingly also. So this is very cool. And of course, if I re-enable the Formula Effector and play with different options, maybe something like this, it will also work perfectly. Of course, if you add a lot of target glyphs, it will begin to become slow, and this is normal because there are a lot of expressions turning. But yeah, this is very, very, very cool. And to finish on this one, I want to show you that you can also stick anything to just text layers, not cloner layers, but also native text layers. So let's do that. Let's create a text, maybe any text, and let's actually go to character, have white, white font, and maybe just something like that. Any text can work. Okay, so let's stylize it a bit, and yeah, just something like that. And now if I select it, and if let's add a bit more spacing, if I play with Formula Effectors again, because I like this wavy animation, so I've added a formula. Again, I will play with the effector curve and reduce the frequency. Okay. Okay, cool. So now, and I will add a bit more vertical spacing in order for my text to not go over the other one, and reduce a bit the transform here. Okay, so they do not intersect, which is pretty awesome. Okay. Okay, very cool. And now, again, if I bring back my little emoji, I can just take it, reduce it in size, and maybe I can add just a point, or yeah, a point can do that, or an exclamation mark. And I want to replace this exclamation mark or this comma here. And I will just select my text. Then I select with Shift the emoji. And now I can just go to MoglyphFX again, Other, and Target. And if I go to the null called Moglyph Target 1, I can still play with the Target Glyph ID, which I will put to the maximum. And the maximum in this case is 17. And now I've replaced, because the hide target glyph is checked on, I have completely replaced the exclamation mark, and it's fully animated thanks to the Formula Effector, and this is working great. So you just couldn't do that with an editable text before, and this is something I'm very proud of. So yeah, this was Target Glyph, and I'm sure you'll like it, guys. The last big new feature I've added in version 4 is something that I'm really proud of too. It's called Connect Glyph, and you find this in the other tab too. So in order to demonstrate this, I will just create this radial cloner, and with this default basic geometry, I will select Add New Glyph. So I will click on this button and just choose the circle, which is the glyph number 51. And the square will be replaced by a circle. So cool. Right now I have this radial cloner, and I will mask the mask. I will hide the mask with this option. And now what I'm gonna do is to go to Other and click on Connect Glyph. The Connect Glyph is really powerful. It allows you to connect all the glyph from a text layer or a cloner layer by a shape layer path. And each clone is connected. Each clone will then represent a point on the path. And if you go to the Moglyph Connect, it's a shape layer, as you can see with the little star icon. I can twirl down this content here and add whatever I want, maybe repetition, or wiggle path, or a zigzag, or play with maybe the stroke and add some dashes, some dots, or some wave, some taper effect, those kind of stuff. So just for a demonstration, I will play with the stroke width a bit to make it more visible. Okay, let's do 15, which is nice. And yeah, you have a bunch of options to play with. So by default, it will be a linear path, okay, that connects all the clones, but the default mode isn't closed. If you want to close it, you have the option to close it with close spline. So let's do that. And now, as you can see, the last clone has been connected to the first clone. And you have now, since there are exactly 5 clones in this radial mode, now a pentagon. So now what I'm going to do is to demonstrate the other options. And first thing you can note that is that you can play with the glyph anchor point. By default, it's said middle center, which is right there, the exact center of each circle, but you can choose anything else. You can choose top left. Okay, you can choose top center, you can choose bottom right, you can choose bottom center. It really depends of what you have as your glyph shapes. So usually I will let these to middle center. And if you have to reposition and offset the anchor point, you can play with these values here to make it more precise. So maybe I want to connect them from there. And you have checkbox that you can tick on, which is called use Bezier tangents. And Bezier tangents, if I click on it, it will become a bit slower, but what it's gonna do is to add intermediate tangents, in and out tangents for each point, which gives me this really cool effect that I can almost find looking like a sagness from ropes and gravity, right? So this is very, very nice. And if I put this connect shape layer behind the radial cloner, I have this nice rope effect between each clone, which is very cool. And of course, if you select your cloner or your text layer, and if you add let's say a formula, as you can see, if I preview the animation, the rope will stick to each clone, which is very nice. And it's completely automatic, so the tangents will adapt, and this is pretty great. If you select again your Moglyph Connect shape layer, if you check this use Bezier tangents, you also have some options that you can twirl down here, Bezier tangents options. And if you have checked it, you can play with the tangents length, which allows me to have some ropes that are more or less big. And if you play with the in tangent angle and the out tangent angle, knowing that this is an in, this is an out, you can play with that. By default, it's 180 degrees for both, which gives me these tangents going towards the bottom of the comp, which is very nice because it gives me this nice sagness on the rope. But you can also tweak these options to have something maybe more like this. And now you have something that is a bit different, but also very interesting, which is if you have something like 90 and 270, you have now something that looks like nodal stuff, right? Where each clone is connected from left to right, which is also a very nice effect. So this is pretty cool. And if I undo that, let's stick with the default option. And this is because the tangents are drawn in global space. If I go to the 10 coordinate system and change the global by local, let's have a look at what happens. Yeah, now you have this kind of animation, which is also very nice because now if I, oh, sorry, by undoing too much time, I removed my Formula Effector, so I will reapply my Formula Effector. And now you have a very different effect, right? Which allows me to draw tangents in local space between each clones. So if you play with the options within tangents and out tangents, let's actually decrease the length value for now. Okay, and now actually I will disable the effector formula temporarily. And now if I play with these options, I can either have something that almost looks like a star with tangents going inside of the shape because it's a closed shape, or I could do something that seems to go outside, like something like this. And look at that, this is pretty cool. So let's increase a bit more the length of the tangents. Okay, and look at this. This is really interesting as an effect. So let's play a bit more with that. And now I've got something that looks like more a flower instead of a star. And this is also very cool because it's very specific, but very fun to play with. And if I re-enable my Formula Effector, you will see really cool animation, which is this one. And yeah, I really don't know how it could be achieved without all this magic, so I'm pretty proud of this one. Typically, this could be done with Cavalry or external plugins, but this kind of stuff is really nice to be able to play with. And yeah, this is local versus global. So if I go back to global, let's add 180 again to have this nice sagness for the ropes. I can also open the randomness option and add some variations. So if I play with values greater than 0, it will add some randomness in the length. As you can see, this rope here seems to be way bigger than this one here. And you can also change the random source. So you can have random distribution of different lengths for ropes. And this is pretty cool. So the nice thing too is that, let's reduce that a bit. I can also increase the number of clones anytime, and it will completely adapt. So please do not add too much clones, because at one point it will be very unresponsive, because these ropes here, especially with use Bezier tangents option, check on, can be very slow if you play too much with that. So let's add a bit more length to the ropes and tangents. And yeah, as you can see, oh, sorry, I have to re-enable the effector formula again. It will work as expected. So very cool effect. Very nice to play with. And of course, you can also benefit from everything you already have in MoglyphFX. So if I take my radial cloner, if I reduce the count to something like 5, for example, or 3 maybe. Okay, so you don't have that much ropes and that much expression. You can use this path layer, which is this Bezier layer. If you go to the Moglyph Connect shape layer, if you twirl down this option, twirl down the content group, and if you select your path and select this path here, you can use that to drive something else. So if I select this one, if I go to Spline Cloner, and if I choose Moglyph C Spline font here, okay, so this is a shape layer. I can now click on Spline with Shift held down, because I want to be on count mode, not the new point mode. And now, if I do that, I have some chain mails. So this is really cool. And of course, if I twirl down these options, I can add more. Okay, cool. So something like that. Pretty nice. I can even hide this shape layer guide here. I can increase in my radial, I can increase the size of the glyph, maybe something like that to have bigger balls. And I can, on my Spline Cloner, click on Add New Glyph because I'm in this MoglyphFX C Spline font. I can click on that and select this one and this one, which gives me this nice iterated glyph, which is very nice to create chain-like effects. And of course, I can change the color of that, put that behind the radial cloner, and you have now a very nice setup, which is completely automatic and procedural. So this is very powerful, very flexible. And this is almost finished, but I have a last thing to show you. So let's create a new comp with, again, that will showcase another thing you can do with the Connect Glyph. And as you can see, if you go with your mouse cursor over the Connect Glyph button, it will say to you, if you maintain down the Shift key, it will use Bezier tangents. So let's try this. So I've created, sorry, I will go back to Moglyph basic geometry because I want basic squares. I will now select Add New Glyph to not have a basic square, but a basic circle by clicking this Glyph 51. And now if I select that, and if I go to Other, Connect, as you can see, if I don't do anything and click that, I will have a linear, not closed shape path. But if I undo that, now if I do the same thing with Shift click held down on the keyboard, you will have the same thing, but with the tangents checked on. And I can also close the spline if needed. And I can also, if I undo that a last time, and because, and only because, this glyph is an exact circle that comes from the right side, because because I've chosen the basic geometry and because it comes from there and only this one, I know the size will be okay for what I will demonstrate after a while. So if I go over there, if I hold down the Shift key and the Alt key on the keyboard, as you can see in the help tip, I will add an offset path to create a convex hull effect. So let's do that. Shift, Alt, click on that, and boom. You have something very cool that you will have to rely on Cavalry to recreate. So select this one again, so the radial cloner radial, and add a Formula Effector, for example. And now look at that. You have a perfect convex hull effect in one click. And this is super awesome. It does just work because it's circles. If you had some squares, it wouldn't work. And this is because I know exactly which size is this circle, because I've called it MoglyphFX, right? So the square and the circles are exactly 100 pixel wide and 100 pixels in height. And so I managed to recreate this convex hull by adding an offset on the shape that is exactly 50. So if I put this value here, I know I can go further or smaller based on the shape I had. And yeah, you can play with that. You can also create some waves, some dashes in the stroke. Again, you can add repeat, and maybe go crazy with what you are doing, maybe something like that. Okay, and yeah, something like that. It's a pretty cool, pretty nice effect. And now you have that, which is awesome. I'm really liking this effect a lot. So yeah, this is how it works. I'm sure you will love this one too, so don't hesitate to play with that, and see you for the last part of the video. So for the other things you have in the other tab, you have the demo project that I've already shown. You have remove glyph, remove effects that work just like in version 3, and you have a custom font that allows you to create your own font for Moglyph. And the new thing here is that I've replaced the contact button by this glyph appendix button, which allows me to open the appendix, which is very convenient for you to check all the glyphs that are available in each font by order of release. So this is very convenient. So if you are searching for a specific shape, don't hesitate to have a look at this document right there. And you don't have to go to the aescripts website to check it. You can change the settings again, just like I've shown before, so you can have a compact UI if you prefer to, and change the default color and the default stroke color and choose the default font you want. And you also retrieve here the info and license. And speaking about fonts, I want to show you what are the 4 different new fonts that I have brought to MoglyphFX version 4 because they are very cool. So the new fonts are there, so with these nice white thumbnails. And the first one I want to show you is the Doodle Abstract. So the Doodle Abstract, if you select it and if you create a grid, and I want to create a grid of exactly 10 by 10 glyphs with maybe a bit less gap in X and Y so that I can see all the glyphs within my composition. And yeah, this is the very first glyph that is contained in this new Doodle Abstract font. So now if I select it and click on Add New Glyph, as you can see, these are all the glyphs that are available from the Doodle Abstract font, and there are a lot of them, exactly 100. There are some ovoid and organic shapes like that, some design shapes, some shapes that have some spikes, so you have both organic and geometric, and even some doodle lines here. So this is a really nice addition to MoglyphFX toolset. And if you want to see them all at once, I can just select an effector and click on step, which allows me to transition from the very first clone to the very last clone. And instead of rescaling them on Y and fading them in opacity, I will change that in the parameters, transform. I do not want to change the scale on Y, so I will zero this out. And I do not want to change the visibility. Okay, so let's add 100. So everything is exactly like before. But now if I twirl up this option and twirl down this one other, I can offset the glyph to exactly 99. And it allows me to transition from the very first glyph shape here to this exact one. And as you can see, this is exactly the same from the Add New Glyph panel. And now you have exactly all the shapes. There are also 3 other fonts that you have in MoglyphFX version 4. The second one is the Moglyph Motion Design 2, which is a nice companion and a more trendy than the motion design that was here previously. So the Motion Design 2, if you select this one and change the font from the character, I can select this here, Motion Glyph Motion Design 2. And now, as you can see, you have exactly 100 shapes that are this one. And again, have a look at this nice selection. I've done my best to provide you the most useful and most trendy shapes you could have for motion design. So these nice geometric shapes here, and spiky shapes, stylized keyframe shapes, and yeah, some flowers and some stars from different shapes, more or less spiky or more or less rounded. Very cool to have because they are everywhere nowadays. And you also have something called Moglyph shape or calyps. Moglyph shape or calyps, which is this one. And you will find this here. So Moglyph shape or calyps, which should be the last one in the list. And this one is also very cool because it's very flexible. You have a lot of different shapes here that can be very useful. And for this one, I have to say a big thanks to the guys from Headquarters TV, which is this account on Instagram, because they are the one who created this Shapeocalypse script, where they have embedded this 100 shapes that you see there with a very nice trailer. And they were kind enough to provide me the source files in order for me to include their shapes as a glyph font for my MoglyphFX toolset. So thanks again. And of course, you can use them anytime you want. And again, don't hesitate to just select the font like Shapeocalypse. And as I've shown in previous session, if I just Shift and Alt click here, I can just maybe select one of these shape, maybe this one, and boom, you have this as a shape layer centered in your comp, which is very, very convenient. So if I undo that, again, Shift Alt click, I will select maybe, I don't know, maybe this nice star, and boom, you have the star you can play with. You can edit the shapes with vector and reuse that in repeater and so on. So very, very convenient. And yeah, this was for the Shapeocalypse font. And you have also a last one called Map Elements. So if I select it, go to Character and select Moglyph Map Elements, which is there. So Map Elements, you have this nice little guys here that are perfect to populate your maps. So as you can see, there are a lot of different variations around the idea of map pins, because it's meant to be used on maps, right? And you have some flags and you have some different pins, and there are also a few icons that you could find in something like a Google Map or other cartography stuff. So very nice to have. And in order for you to use that, I strongly advise you to use the new Spline Point mod. So let's say you have a trajectory to draw from one city to another. So maybe you have to draw something like this with a path between some different cities or countries on a map. And I can just draw that with the Bezier tool on a shape layer. Just for the sake of the demonstration, I will increase the stroke size and make it pink. So this is your path, and you have drawn some path here with some points. So I have 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, 5 point, and 6 point. And let's say these are the places of your cities or countries, right? So you can just select that, go to the fonts and choose the map elements, which is a new font. And you can then Shift and Alt click on this Spline Cloner, and boom, you have your dots that will be distributed onto the points of your path. And now you can add anything you want from the font. So maybe I want some map pins, so I will select that. And since this is already selected here, I can click on Add New Glyph, and maybe I want to add some map pins, like maybe this one. And yeah, this one, for example. And once I've done that, I can close it. And now what I'm gonna do is to ensure that the base of my map pins is correctly positioned on the points, because right now if I go to there, I can see where the points are. It is there, okay, and there and there. So I want the base to be here. So I will go to my MoglyphFX, go to the glyph here, transform, and play with the anchor point Y. And I know, because I've done that a lot, it's like maybe 33 or 32. So you have to do that and to eyeball this, but yeah, in general, 32 or 33 is correct. So as you can see, now the map pins are correctly positioned, and I can now, twirl down this glyph 1 effect, go to transform, and if I want to rescale my map pins to be bigger, I can play with the scale X and scale Y. So I can maybe add 150 and 150, and now I've got some nice map pins that are along my path, and I can animate this in just a few clicks thanks to MoglyphFX Effector delay. And if I select that, if I apply a delay effector, as you can see, if I preview the animation, I've got this. So this is not really what I want, so I will undo that. I want to shift click on delay, which will make my map pins disappear, and now I've got this. So this is typically something that you could want for a motion design map, so this is already pretty cool. Of course, you can play with the shape layer path and maybe add a trim path there in French, so for my French version of After Effects. And yeah, once you have all your points that are there, you can keyframe the end of the trim path and type 0 at the beginning. So now I've got this. And of course, if you feel that the animation is way too fast for the map pins, you can still play with the Moglyph cloner, go to the effector delay, effector animation order, and play with the offset. So if you increase the offset, maybe something like that. Yeah. So if I put something like maybe 50 in my case, great. As you can see, it's working great. Perfect. And since this is a trajectory, I can maybe add on the stroke some dashes and maybe have something that is a bit thinner. Yeah, perfect. And maybe add an expression to the offset, like something like time multiplied by 150, something like that. Okay, actually this is the inverse, so I will add the minus time. Okay, cool. And now I have animated this with just a few clicks, and maybe I could want something that is a bit more rich and complicated. So maybe not just a scale animation that is elastic, but I could want to do something like, let me show you, animation remapping. And instead of remapping preset, I will choose the bounce. And instead of the parameters, I will transform 0 out the scale X, so 0 in scale X, 0 in scale Y. So now nothing is changing, but I can play with the position Y and move them right there, so minus something in order to make them move and rise up toward the top of the composition. And now if I do that and maybe decrease the visibility to 0. Okay, and there is a problem here because I can't have an opacity to 0 with elastic and bounce, so I have to uncheck the compensate clumped values. And if I uncheck that, I will have the opacity be exactly what I wanted, so 0. And now if I do that, yeah, look at that, very cool, very complex animation. And what is very, very great is that now that my animation is down, I can just, if I need to, go to my shape, go to the Bezier tool and add some more points if needed. So imagine your client asked you to go through another city or another town. You can just do that. How cool is that? So yeah, this is pretty nice. And of course now my animation is a bit too long, so I can go back to effector delay, animation order, and decrease a bit the offset, maybe something like that, 12, maybe even 10. And yeah, this is working perfectly. So pretty cool effect, and just a few clicks. So very nice to have this kind of new font and Spline Cloner Points mode, of course. And yeah, this is one of the available glyphs in the font, so you can still go in the glyph effect, and if you want to change the map pin after a while, you can just select your map element font and click on the cloner, click on Add New Glyph, and just have a look at what shape you have here. And if your client maybe needs something else, like I want some flags, well, I want to have this shape instead of the map pin, so I will choose the shape that is numbered glyph number 72. As you can see, I go over this glyph and I can see its ID, so glyph number 72. Okay, so close that. And here in the glyph effect, I can change the glyph ID to be 72. And now I've got the exact same thing, but I still have to drill down the transform and play a bit with the anchor point on X in order to have something that is perfectly aligned on each path. So I have just eyeballed it, but you can play with values. And now you have the exact same animation with another glyph, which is awesome. Of course, you can play and animate that and see what animation, what glyph you have, right? So it depends on what you need. So yeah, take a look at how much variation you have for map pins. It's just awesome. So yeah, this is it. This is it right now. Actually, just know that at this moment, you have, with all these fonts available right now, more than 2,500 glyphs to play with, which is a huge library of shapes you can just use in your own projects, and this is very awesome. So yeah, this is now the end of this video overview of MoglyphFX version 4, which is packed with so much new features. So sorry for the long video, but there were a lot to show and a lot to talk about. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach me out and to open support ticket if you have any problem with installation. So if you love MoglyphFX, please share, like and comment, and please spread the love. See you later. Bye guys.